right, we're ready. All right, welcome to the Lincoln City Council meeting for February 29th. Let's all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a period of silent meditation. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, in accordance with LB 898, a copy of the Open Meetings Act is posted at the back of the chamber. The order of business of the City Council is as follows. The clerk will call the items listed on the agenda under public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak on an item should come forward after the clerk reads that item. The applicant and those in favor should speak first, then those opposed. The applicant may then make one short rebuttal. Each speaker should begin by stating name, address, and whether you're speaking in favor or in opposition to the item. Testimony is limited to 5 minutes per speaker. After all public hearings, the council will vote on resolutions and items listed under third reading. On the second and last meetings of the month immediately prior to adjournment, anyone may speak on an issue not on the agenda for that date nor planned for a future agenda. If you need an agenda, we have some in the back of the room, or you can follow along on the Lincoln City Council page on your smartphone. If you need a parking pass, Teresa has some up front here. Before we get started, we have a Boy Scout from Troop 69 who is earning his last merit badge before he gets his Eagle Scout. So let's all congratulate him. All right, now we've embarrassed him, we'll move on to the meeting.
All right, our first item is our public hearing consent agenda, items 1 through 3.
Anyone wishing to speak on these items, please come forward. All right, next items, please.
If not, we can vote on these two items. Items 1 and 2 were introduced by Raybold.
So moved.
Second.
By Lyrian, discussion. All right, call the roll, please.
Raybold?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Fellers?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Next then is our public hearing liquor resolutions. Those coming forward are asked to sign in on the sign-in sheet at the podium. Those testifying are asked to raise their right hand for the clerk to administer the oath. After the oath, witnesses shall state their names and addresses. I'll call items 4 and 5 together. They are the application of Appian Way Lodging, LLC, doing business as Fairfield Inn and Suites, for a Class I liquor license at 8455 Andermatt Drive, and the related manager application of John Klimple.
All right, anyone wishing to speak on these items, please come forward. Okay.
Had you talked to Mr. Klimple about attending?
I had not heard back from them.
Okay. All right, we'll move on to the next item unless there's somebody that's wishing to speak to this. All right, next item, please.
Next then is item 6, application of Cappies for an SDL to cover an outdoor area measuring approximately 20 feet by 40 feet and an indoor area measuring approximately 85 feet by 85 feet at the Gala Reception Hall at 2602 Park Boulevard on March 12th, March 19th, 26th, April 16th, April 23rd, and May 7th, 2016 from 11 a.m. to 2 a.m.
Okay, anyone wishing to speak to this item, please come forward. All right, we're doing real well tonight, okay?
Mr. Chair, why don't we just hold on to this in case they would come later in the meeting, and since no one showed up, or do you want to just go ahead and put them on next week's agenda?
What do we think? Should we put them on next week's? I mean,
Okay, I make a motion we
Cappy's
delay
here
these
almost
for a
every
week.
week.
Second?
Cappy's does have
March
a
12th.
wedding March 12th, so hopefully they will be here.
And he's here.
He's usually here, so
Yeah,
that's
I mean, he's
surprising.
one that's like here every single time, so.
He knows about
Are
that.
they absolutely required to be present? for
They're
a
not
vote?
required to be present for the SDLs, are they, Teresa?
No.
I
Okay.
think we could, I mean, these are
Oh, he doesn't
kind
need beer
of
for
cut and
that?
paste on Cappies for all these weddings. It seems to me we could approve those at least.
I would just say approve. Oh, yes, sir.
Investigator Conan Schaefer with Lincoln Police. CAPIs, SDLs meet all of the requirements. They're no different than the previous ones.
Okay, well, I'd move approval of item 6.
Second. Second by Roy. Discussion. All right, call the roll, please.
Raybold?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Fellers?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Motion carried 6-0.
And I'd move we delay 1 week on items 4 and 5.
Second.
Second by Jane. Discussion. All right, call the roll, please.
Raybold?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Fellers?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
All right, move on to the
All
resolutions.
right, next then, public hearing resolutions. Item 7 is directing submittal to the electors of the city a proposed general obligation bond issue for construction of improvements to the city's storm sewer system at the May 10, 2016 primary election.
Good evening. My name is Ben Higgins. I'm with Public Works and Utilities, and with me is Lynn Johnson. He's Director of Parks.
Good evening.
So we have a presentation, and I'll start it, and then Lynn will finish it off. And then the financiers hopefully are here, and then after we're done, then the financiers will come up to talk about the bond specifics. Somebody will talk about how the bond's going to work, and then somebody will talk about the rate structure. So that I'd like to talk about the 16 bond. This is just, the approval for this is just to put it on the ballot. It's not actually to vote for the bond. It's just to put it on the ballot. These projects have been planned for. They're in watershed master plans. They're in the capital, it's actually part of the approved capital improvement program, the one that was approved in 2014, 2015 for the next 2 years. The bond issue was actually in there. We've done urban drainage studies. And this is just the way the stormwater projects are funded. So we've been doing this since 1982 and possibly before that. So we've had over 11 bond issues that have passed in that time. Probably one of the bigger things is that we use the bond funds to leverage other funds. And of course, you probably all know about that signature project over there at 56 and Fletcher. We actually call it the 56 and Morton project, but it's actually right around that 56 and Fletcher area, actually a little bit west of that. And so we've actually got federal funding pretty close to being finalized on that. We've gotten verbal approval for that. And I just got another call from today from FEMA, or not from FEMA, but from NEMA, saying that we're going to, I mean, it's all done. They're just waiting for a signature on that. And she said that they might send an email today, which I didn't get, but hopefully we'll get an email this week getting the written approval of that project there. And that project is 75% funded by federal funds, and these are hazard mitigation grant program funds. And so we've gotten these because somebody else has dropped off the scope. I mean, somebody else had these funds, but they weren't able to do matching funds for it, so we got the project. So that's a pretty big deal for us. And then the other 12.5% for that is the NRD, and then we'd be in it for 12.5%. A lot of these projects were coordinated with other entities like the county, engineering services and parks. So for example, Salt Creek Stream Repair. This is one the county came to us and said that, we need to do, and Parks said, well, we need to do that one too. And another good example, which I'll show a photo later, is West Day Culvert replacement for a culvert, which we call the big wheel culvert because there's actually a big wheel stuck up in the culvert, and we'll show you that photo. And then again, and some of the bond funds help to maintain our CRS rating, and CRS stands for Community Rating System. There's 1,600 communities nationwide that do this, and we're in the top 5% of that. We actually have a rating of 5, and that gives everybody that's in the floodplain that has flood insurance a 25% break in flood insurance. So a pretty good program. Delay on not doing it increases risk for economic loss to local businesses. We have a couple businessmen over there at 56 and Fletcher that'll be here to talk about it. Public safety, just continued infrastructure deterioration, failing, losing leverage funds. It's just kind of one of those things that's just pay now or pay more later. So, assuming this gets passed and gets on the ballot, then actually the support for this, the advertisement for that is paid by local consultants and local engineers. So this is what we use the projects for, and this is kind of the same way we've done these for the last several years. I mean, most of these. So urban storm drain that's our big one to help with urban storm drain infrastructure, watershed projects. Trying to get out there in the county or real close to the city to do projects because it's going to be a lot cheaper to do them now than to do them later. And a lot of those are stream bank rehabilitation projects, floodplain flood-prone area projects. Stream rehab, we always do a big parks project every bond issue. Street drainage, that's actually a new project that we haven't had before. Water quality, watershed master plan, and another new project is Emerald Ash Borer that Lynn Johnson will talk about later. This is kind of the way the percentages are. You can see the big percentages there, the 31%, that's for urban storm drain projects, implementation of master plans. These are construction projects, that's at 15% there. And then, so you can see a lot of how that is broken out there. This is just an example of some of the projects in the area, and they're kind of scattered throughout the city. And so this just gives you an idea where some of the projects are at. This is just an example of previous bond projects with the past bond funding we've got, and this isn't even all of them, so this is just a kind of a listing of, I just made a listing of all of them. You can kind of see we do them all over the city. So with watershed master plans, so these are projects that have been planned for. So we do watershed master plans. We have almost all the city, entire city except for northern Salt Creek, we have master plans for. And this is an example of Haynes Branch. And so these are stream bank where the bank is unstable or the bed is unstable. And so if we can go and fix these, these are systematic problems that if they don't get fixed, that they keep on traveling upstream. So this is just an example of some projects as part of a watershed master plan. And again, this is just kind of a listing of the past bond funds that we've had that have all been approved. And again, this is kind of the signature project, 56 and Morton. You can kind of see the flooding pictures there. And these are actually not photos of the same flooding. It literally floods here every 2 years or more often. And so this is really our kind of a signature project that we'd really like to get done. It's really in desperate need of doing this one. And this is the one where we have the leveraged funds from FEMA. Again, this is the big wheel culvert. You can kind of see the big wheel that's there. And the culvert, this is deteriorating, and so we kind of like to get this fixed before West A comes along. And when we fix this, we're going to look at it, and it's going to be redone such that it's going to have the capacity, and it's going to take into account, the future road improvement project over there on West A. As I said before, we always try to do a park every time we have a bond issue, and this year it'll be, if it passes, it'll be Urbandale, Rudge, and Stransky Park. And you can kind of see here in the photo how it's pretty deteriorating pretty badly. And for those that you were on the tour, you were able to see that. This is one of the Salt Creek projects that we want to do. So this is coordinated with the county and Parks Department. And you can see there that the abutment and the pier coming down are in pretty bad shape. This is an urban drainage project. Again, we have a long list of urban drainage projects, and this one has kind of risen to the top. Over on the left-hand side, that's a little culvert there. It's like a 10-inch culvert there that feeds a pretty big area there, and you can see that photo right where that van is. That area gets flooded there. The person that's there is Mr. Bro, and he's actually been flooded quite a number of times. So this project, the 46th and High project, would alleviate that situation. The 2016 bond, it addresses both the existing urban area and new growth areas. They affect all kinds of projects: urban drainage, floodplain management, water quality, and stream stability. It affects infrastructure renewal, and it's used to leverage other funds. So we think there's some real critical projects here. With that, turn it over to Lynn.
Great. Appreciate the opportunity to be here this afternoon. Some of these images you've seen before as we've talked about preparing for Emerald Ash Borer to arrive in Lincoln. This is an image of a residential street in, I think, Ohio that is entirely lined with mature ash trees. We have a number of very similar streets to this in Lincoln. If you think about what happens when it rains, those large trees intercept an awful lot of that rainfall as it's coming down. I think we've probably all experienced walking along a street and being relatively dry during a storm event because of the impact of the leaves catching the rainfall as it's raining. The next image that's going to come up is that street 3 years later. And as we've talked in the past, Emerald Ash Borer affects communities very quickly. When Emerald Ash Borer moves into a community, essentially all of the community's ash trees, if they're not treated, will die within about a 15-year period. And that happens very quickly. The next image is of a residential street, not the same one that we were just looking at, but you can see the impact of when emerald ash borer moves into a neighborhood and the trees have to come down, and then you can envision what happens during a storm event. And one of the things that we have heard is that a number of the communities have experienced localized flooding that they didn't used to have in areas because they lost their large mature tree canopy, and then all of that water that's coming down that used to be intercepted by the trees is then just running off very quickly. And essentially that's what we're trying to avoid by adding this funding to the proposed bond issue. This next image is one that you've seen as well. This is what they call the emerald ash borer death curve. And one of the things about emerald ash borer is it affects the trees very quickly. Within about the first 3 or 4 years, you don't really know what's in a community. Typically, emerald ash borer is not discovered until it's been within a community about 3 or 4 years, about where that green arrow is shown. And then once it's discovered, the death curve is essentially exponential, and the trees begin to die very quickly. And essentially, within about the first 7 years, about 80% of the trees will be killed if they're not treated. We have about 12,000 public ash trees along streets in Lincoln. Within the first 7 years, we envision that about 11,000 of those will die. One of the things that, as we've talked with communities that are dealing with emerald ash borer, one of the things they've advised us is you can't begin soon enough to try to begin replacing the trees. And that's essentially what we're doing here, is we're trying to get out ahead of emerald ash borer and get large trees removed and replaced so that we don't have as many trees to remove. And we've also begun to establish that tree canopy ahead of emerald ash borer arriving in Lincoln. As Ben said, we're going to be doing some of the same things as well. We will be using these funds to try to leverage some grants. We won't be able to leverage grants for removal, but we will be able to leverage grants and I think some local funding for tree replacement. And then the last image that I have for you is, again, one that you've seen before. We have mapped all of the 12,000 ash street trees in Lincoln. They're distributed throughout the community, but we have large concentrations of ash primarily on the east side and in the south side of town. And I would guess that those are probably the areas where we would be concentrating on this ash removal and replacement project. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have this evening.
Questions? Roy?
When you showed us the picture of the street in Ohio.
Yep.
I just want to make sure we're all clear. Are we talking about the city paying for street trees in the city right of way, or just in parks, or both?
It would essentially be both. Initially, with this funding, we would focus on street trees because that's probably the area where we have the greatest potential for flooding to occur when the trees are gone. Total, we've got about 14,000 public ash trees, about 12,000 of those along streets and about 2,000 of those in parks. But with this initial funding, we'd be focusing on removing and replacing ash street trees.
Cindy?
Yeah, thank you. A question for Ben.
Sure.
Thanks very much for your presentation today. So you prepared for us a priority list
Correct,
of
yes.
projects, correct? Okay. And so I just want to tell you, I'm glad to see a lot of Northeast projects at that top priority, because I think we've needed a lot of that in the Northeast part of town, no doubt about that.
Okay, thank you.
I did have a couple questions for you on a couple of the projects.
Sure.
You mentioned the 56th and Fletcher project.
Correct, yes.
Okay, and my understanding is that there was funding for that as part of the 2012 stormwater bond.
That's correct, yes.
Okay, and so, my understanding is that we didn't get the federal funding to take care of that, correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay, and so are those funds still held aside for this particular project?
So what happened was that we had those, we put an application for in that, but we never made the cut originally. And so what happened was somebody else had a major project and they couldn't come up with the funding for that, so that funding became free about 2 years ago. And it's taken us 2 years here to just work out all the details on that, and they've verbally told us that all the funding is now available for us at 75%.
So what about the funding that we had for that out of the stormwater bond? Where's that money?
Well, back a couple years ago, we didn't think we were going to have that funding. We thought it was going to go away, so we expended it on some other projects.
And I guess one of my other questions is, these projects, when they're done, to what degree are they going to alleviate the flooding like we saw in May of last year up in the northeast area of town?
So, I mean, a lot of these are localized flooding, so if you think of like that 60th and Lighton one, you know, that'll help with that localized area there. You know, the one like on 56th and Fletcher, that'll help with that area there. But, you know, none of these will help with Dead Man's Run. There is one project in there, and that's that Dead Man's Run study. And so that's the one we're kind of looking at the big, you know, the big picture of Dead Man's Run to do that, and that's that core study. And so, you know, if that comes into fruition in that core study, you know, that'll be a big project. It'll be kind of like a mini Antelope Valley to help with getting Dead Man's Run. And there's about 900 people, you know, 900 residences and commercial properties out in there that would help out that quite a bit if that came into fruition. But that's, you know, the construction of that's still a long ways away. So.
How long do you think?
The NRD is a major player on that. So, you know, I just really can't say it'd be at least a few years. I mean, we have to go through the whole core process. You know, they have to get their funding together. We'd have to come up with a local match for that. Right now, I think it's about a $14 million project, and about $10 million of that would be the core.
Okay,
And that would be, and you know, it wouldn't take everybody out like Antelope Valley did, but it would take a significant amount of people out of the floodplain in that area. And I don't know about you, but I'm sure you do too, but I get a lot of calls from that area, so. You know,
right.
about being in the floodplain.
So that and the priority is just for the study itself?
It's just for the study, yes. There's no funding in there for the construction because it's just, you know, that's past the bond issue, you know, what we'd want to expend in that time frame, so.
Thank you.
Okay.
Jane?
Ben, can you talk, or Lynn, or maybe you both, can you talk a little bit about the timing of the bond issue? So walk us through. So if we approve the stormwater bond to go out to the voters, then what happens in May? And then how soon can these projects get started?
That's a good question. So, and it might be that Scott or Mike, you know, one of the financiers might have a better idea of that. But usually what happens if the bond gets passed in May, and then it usually takes 2 or 3 months for those bonds to get sold, and then we usually get the cash in 2 or 3 months. And so what we do usually is once the bond passes, you know, then we start doing, we actually go out and work with the consultants to get scope of works ready to go. And some projects we might be a little further on design already, and so sometimes we'll have some shovel-ready projects that are ready to go really quick. So it's just kind of a mixed bag on that, so.
Yeah, the tree replacement projects, we have existing contracts in place, and so we could utilize those existing tree contracts to begin doing the removal, and then we would start immediately right after that, getting contracts for doing the replanting, so.
So Lynn, can you talk a little bit about getting it started now versus starting it later? Because I see one study, that it's quite a bit more expensive later on. Can you talk a little bit about?
It is. One of the advantages of doing it now is that we won't have to treat these trees. Part of our strategy is to treat a declining percentage of the trees over time as they're removed. So any of these trees that we take out now and get them replaced, we won't have to treat those trees, so it does save us cost. The other thing I would say is that I think that our bids right now are very competitive for tree removal. And once we have emerald ash borer in the community, and once there's a significant volume of trees that need to be addressed, we're anticipating the cost for removal is going to go up as well. So, and I know that Scott Josiah with the Nebraska Forest Service is here tonight. He can probably also provide some additional insight as well.
One last question. So part of the emerald ash borer stormwater bond would go towards removing some trees and replanting them with a different type of tree. But will it also go to treating some of the trees? Is that what it's projected for? No.
None of this money would go towards treatment. It is just for removal and replacement. And the replacement is really key because we're taking down trees that today serve as part of our stormwater management function. We're trying to get new trees back in place so they get a chance to grow and essentially replace that function.
Okay, thank you.
Carl?
Thank you. Okay, questions for Ben. So as I understand it, the federal funding that we get is kind of a snooze, you lose.
Use it or lose it.
Okay, all
Snooze,
right.
you lose.
Okay, so, and we did snooze once before, but we didn't completely lose out, but.
Well, we really didn't snooze, they snoozed.
They snoozed,
Yeah.
okay, all right, so, all right, but, so we don't wanna risk snoozing.
No, yeah,
Okay.
I don't think we want to get
'Cause
caught.
looking at the
taking a
math
nap,
here,
so.
we put in $400,000, and then the NRD also puts in $400,000.
Yeah,
and
it's roughly, yes.
The rest of it's federal funds.
Yes.
So we're well over 200 or 2 million. We had a letter. All of us received a letter from the Lincoln Airport,
Correct, yes.
and I wasn't exactly sure what project was impacting them. Is it in Tier 3, the flood-prone easement acquisition? Is that what that is?
Well, if you look at that, and look at that Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3, if you look at Tier 1 where it says miscellaneous projects on that,
Okay.
that you'll see the very last 3 or 4 words on that says Salt Creek Study. That's that one study that one of the consultant firms is really pushing for to do, and that's the one where when Mickey was here, we said, well, we'll do a third of it, and the NRD will do a third of it, and the business people will do a third of that. And so I parked that, that amount of money that would go into that under that miscellaneous studies. I'm not sure what page it's on. It's in Tier 1 though.
Yeah.
Wouldn't the airport be Dead Man's Run in the Army Corps?
No, it would be Oak Creek.
So it's under miscellaneous repairs.
Yeah, it's no, I think it's under miscellaneous. Let me just check here.
Miscellaneous has Forest Lake Boulevard.
I think it's on page 2. Yeah, the very top one, miscellaneous repairs and projects.
Okay.
And
Oh, I
and
see.
Councilman
Here's
Camp,
what-
that's also that Forest Lake Boulevard is in that same one too. So that's that one we've been talking about with
Right, yeah, Mr. Thomas.
with some of the people out there. So
So what's the difference then with the U.S. Army
Hold
Corps
on,
of Engineers?
let's let Carl finish his questions. and
sorry,
then-
sorry.
That's all right. Just I just wanted to make sure that I knew where that was
Correct. Yeah.
because seemed like a important, legitimate issue that the airport authority was raising with regard to not only their properties but
Right.
some other core properties in the area. Okay, thank you.
Larry and then John.
Ben, can you talk to us a little bit about the same question that Jane asked about Ash Borer, the cost of doing these projects now versus doing them later? You've touched on it
Right.
a bit, but we have this long list of projects. They've been prioritized for us, but can you help us understand what kind of cost increase, if any, incurs by delaying these projects that have been in the CIP?
Well, for example, like, if you kind of think of like a culvert, if that becomes totally in repair and, fails, kind of like that one that's out in Fletcher between 7th and 14th, then that's, then that road has to be closed. And, if you could think of like West A, if that culvert failed, I mean, it's not an imminent failure mode, but, the more long you leave it, just the more it's going to cost to fix it. And if you get something like that fails, that's a real cost to the traveling public there.
It's been no secret that there's a lot of concern in the community about the West A
Right.
road improvements that are needed. You mentioned a culvert specific to that
Right.
area. If we postponed the culvert but went forward eventually with the West A road improvements, what does that do to the culvert project costs?
Well, they did just have to be picked up by engineering services later on, and I mean, that's gonna be a delay in what they're doing, because anytime you do like a massive road project, you have to do the culverts first. And so if we're able to get ahead of the game and get that done now, I mean, that's gonna save time for them and save money for them in the long run.
So people in the West A community would be able to
Yeah.
expect that their road improvements would come sooner should this go through
Yep.
as part of the bond.
Well, and this is the one, like I get a call from maintenance department, because they actually, if you ever go by there, they actually have a barricade out there. And we actually have a photo that you can see there's a huge drop off there about a foot or two away. So, I think it just helps, because we try to do these projects with engineering services and coordinate them with them. So this is just more than an emergency project, because this is actually a pretty high dollar cost one. But sometimes we'll get calls from maintenance and we'll go out and do like a $10,000, $20,000 project just, without a lot of upfront warning about it, like 63rd and Pine Lake Road. If you've ever been down there and looked off to the north, I mean, there's a real steep drop off about 5 foot away, and we're about ready to send out that for a unit price bid. So, and that, that's about 10,000, 20,000. But that's where sometimes those miscellaneous funds go to. So, allows us to have some flexibility for that. So.
I'd also like to ask Jeff a question, if I may.
Can we wait for staff questions so these guys can finish?
Sorry,
And
just thinking
I-
of all his stuff.
Yeah, can we actually wait until we have all the other people that are here to testify for staff questions? Thank you.
Mr. Hoppy asked me to clarify one point that I made. I mentioned treatment, and we've talked about treatment of ash in the future. That is not a long-term strategy. It's a short-term approach to stretch out the death curve. So we definitely have treatment as part of our future treatment as part of our plan, but it's not the solution. It's just the opportunity to kind of stretch those costs out over a longer period of time, so.
John, did you have questions before they step in?
Two quick questions. I mean,
Sure.
yes, Mr. Higgins, could you distinguish the 200,000 for the U.S. Corps of Engineers study versus your miscellaneous 200,000?
Yes, that money that's set aside for Dead Man's Run there, that's for the core study, and so that's specifically set aside as a cost share with the NRD, to help fund that study for that. So again, like,
Be the boundaries of that.
that goes from the confluence, I think, to 56th Street. And when Glenn will come up and talk about that, and he may be able to clarify that. I'm just going from memory here. I think that goes to 56th Street, so.
Okay. And then second thing is, you have a project, you've estimated so much, as you're telling Ms. Lamb, where you didn't use that 2012 money. Who
Yeah.
decides where that goes to if you don't expend it?
Oh, what we do is we meet with the NRD every month, so we talk about projects that need to be done, and then also we talk internally and with the, with the assistant director and the director, so that's more of an internal discussion on where those get spent. Those funds, if we didn't fund something else, where they would go to, so.
Thank you.
Okay. Other questions? Roy?
I want to go back to what Cindy was talking about, and, I get this idea from people that when we tax them, they expect the money to be spent on the projects we told them we'd spend it on. And so we find today that 2012, there was a bond
Right.
for stormwater, and some of the money was not spent in the way it was expected, and you said it was spent on other projects.
Right.
I'd like to know, number one, what other is, and
Okay.
number two, are there any kind of assurances we can give the public that when they vote on this, that they're gonna get the projects they're voting on, that we're talking about today, and not something else?
Well, we do the best we can, but sometimes things like that, when the federal government says we're not going to fund that portion of it, then, and there's other projects that come up. Sometimes projects come in more expensive, sometimes they come in less. When we put these bonds together, we're given estimates.
It wasn't spent on something outside of stormwater.
No,
Correct,
we can't.
okay.
I
Well,
mean,
I
the
want people to
stormwater,
understand that we spend
Yeah.
it on
Yeah.
stormwater projects.
yeah, the stormwater bond says, you can spend it on like kind of projects, but you cannot spend it outside stormwater projects. We're not taking any of these stormwater bond funds and spending them on something that's not related to stormwater.
So that brings up another concern, though.
Sure.
Because it's been suggested that perhaps emerald ash borers are the ash trees are the right issue with the wrong funding mechanism, because once you open this door, then you can redirect unspent funds from many of these projects, if it occurs, onto something that most people would not, or some people would not consider to be part of stormwater management.
Well, and we've worked with parks in the past, and we've set aside funds for parks in the past to help with other things like floodplain management. We keep a pretty good track of that, and we usually don't. In fact, anything that usually happens is we actually take some of the money that's set aside for parks and use it for more stormwater-related stuff in the past, because sometimes they're out there leveraging their projects to get other funding, to help with some floodplain acquisition, and that never always doesn't follow through, and so it's more, we've never had extra money that we've taken from stormwater bonds projects for urban drainage and moved it over into that area. Sometimes we do that for a parks project that might be a channel project, but that's really strongly related to stormwater management, so.
Cindy?
Thank you, Ben. Okay, so I'm looking at this sheet where you guys prioritize number one, projects, and I have a question. The first three there look pretty severe. Replacement of existing failing infrastructure on the first two, and failing drainage inlets on the third one. So how long have we known they're failing?
Oh, for quite a while, but if you look through our long list, we literally have, 100 or so projects on there, and all these projects we're not gonna do is because some of them have a really low, we're just not gonna go arbitrarily out, fix a project because it's slightly undersized. And so sometimes we've known 33rd Street's failing, but we just prioritize projects as we get the bond funds, and we felt that we've had projects before this that were more critical than this. So, but we've known that these laterals, maintenance has been asking to work on this 33rd Street for a long time.
Okay.
And we've gotten calls like 44th and Calvert area, we've gotten calls for years on that one, for over 10 years.
So how long have we known of these failing infrastructure on 33rd Holdridge to Baldwin?
Oh, several years. Yeah, we just keep on.
Been 10?
What's that? Oh, yes, yeah. We've no, just the longer you hold on to it, the more and more often they have to go there and do patchwork. If you've ever driven along 33rd Street, it's just more and more patchwork through there, and, you can see all the inlets, have gone back, and you can see the steel showing. But we've got other projects, we've done other projects in the past that have had that need, as much as that need or more, so.
So the order that you listed them on the proposed projects when you tiered them?
Yep.
On priority, the order that you listed them, is that the priority you intend to fix them?
No, these are all just in alphanumeric order. If you look through there, you can see they're alphabetized on there. So all of the tier 1 are critical, but they're not in a they're not within tier 1. They are not in a priority order.
Okay, so, but they would be completed before tier 2?
That depends on the funding. If we get all the funding, sometimes, if we have some of these projects already in design, we're gonna go ahead and finish those first. We're just not gonna go, design one and do it and then go design another one and do it. We're gonna do them as quickly as we can. So some of them are partially designed, so we'll be ready to go faster, so.
Do some of them not even have a master plan, or let's say in the first tier? Are there any that don't have a plan?
So like 8th and Park, 20th and Calvert, 33rd and Holdridge, 44th and Calvert, these were all part of urban drainage studies. 56 and Colfax, that one's got quite a lot of design on it. 60th and Layton, Cardwell Branch, that's actually going, that's something we could do pretty quick. Dead Man's Run, that's been going on for quite a long time. That's been going on for a year or so. For example, like the Salt Creek main stem improvement, these Salt Creek ones you can see on that second page, none of those have been, those haven't even gone out to, we haven't started design or anything on those, but those are all in the master plan. Stream rehab on Parks project, again, you'll see that, you can actually see that specifically named in the capital improvement program. We haven't started on that. West Van Dorn, West A, and Southwest 30th, we've actually gotten a start on those for the design, so.
Okay, I'm sorry, can you go back to the,
Sure.
is it the Reg Irvingdale?
Yeah, the one that says stream rehab on Parks property, that's one we haven't started design on at all yet.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right, are you guys gonna stick around?
Okay,
for
sure, yeah.
Great, thank you.
I think next will be Scott King
Sounds
and
good.
Michael Rogers, and they'll talk about the bond issue specifically, so.
Sounds good.
Okay, thanks.
Want to go?
That's up to them.
If you don't mind, we'll get you just next to him.
I'm
Well,
not trying to find no place to go. Just like you.
exactly.
No, not at all. Good evening, Scott Keene, Emeritus Investment Corp.
And Mike Rogers, Gilmore and Bell.
If you'd like to
Sure, I'll
summarize the
I'll read off.
resolution.
The resolution in front of you would call an election on the statewide primary election on May 10th to have the voters authorize the issuance of general obligation bonds in a principal amount of not more than $9,800,000 for stormwater and flood management system improvements in the city for projects, proposed projects, which are expected to include those on attachment 1 to the resolution. So that's it in a nutshell. It's a similar resolution as you've seen for calling an election in the past.
Go ahead, Scott, before we ask
Okay,
questions.
very quickly, the current plan would be to go to market as quickly as we can after the May election. The question was asked earlier, how quickly we could get to market. Typically, we would spend 2 weeks after the election to draft the documents, get them prepared to send off to the rating agencies, give them 3 weeks to do their review, set a date for the sale of the bonds, generally about a week after the ratings are available, and then settle the bond issue about 2 weeks after that. So generally 60 days, so I would say the first part to middle part of July, the proceeds from this bond issue would be available. We'd fully expect that the rating agencies would affirm the city's AAA ratings from both Moody's and Standard & Poor's, because these are unlimited tax general obligation bonds once the voters have approved them. The current planning has been, we've been using an assumed interest rate of about 3.5%. Actually, in today's market, we'd probably be closer to 2.75%. So the interest rate environment is very, very favorable, and argues for us to be able to keep moving forward quickly after the voters approve the projects, to go forward with that financing as quickly as we can.
Larry.
Mike, thanks for being here. You had mentioned the language projects expected to include. Is that how we address the issue raised about projects that are listed as likely to happen for voters, and then if for some reason federal funding or other sources don't come through, we legitimately use for other projects? Can you speak to this issue?
Sure. The resolution and the ballot language itself is very general. The ballot language doesn't have any of those specific items listed. It simply authorizes general obligation bonds up to a principal amount for improvements to the stormwater management and storm sewer system of the city. The resolution does call out a list of specific projects and indicates that that the types of improvements would shall include, but not necessarily be limited to, some or all of those improvements shown on attachment 1. So it's, I think that's the expected use. It indicates the expected use. It becomes challenging to lock yourself into too specific of a listing, because things do change, and over the course of time, if a project becomes more difficult to do because of other funding issues that come up, or other projects rise up to the top of the list because they're higher priority, that flexibility would be lost if you would hardwire it into the ballot question.
You serve as bond counsel for other cities, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Is this a common practice in other cities as well?
Yes, for any ballot question, whether it's a city or a school district or any type of political subdivision, it's very common to include general language so that it's flexible, so that the projects being financed are not necessarily set in stone. It's what's expected to be done at the time the election has been called.
Thank you.
Other questions? All right. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. All right, sir. Other testifiers. You're up. Yeah. You didn't have to wait that long.
Adherence to your rules and regs, I'm James Moeller. I'm from the 29th district. I'm from the 3rd district. And my address is Briarhurst, 5552 Blackpool Road. And it's Blackpool when it rains. We have a flow pad in our area. It's an open ditch. When it rains, it's bank full. And in the last couple of times, well, the 8-inch rain, it went over. And it washed out your bicycle path. And they repaired that. However, they did not repair the problem that caused our Briarhurst Association, which is a housing association with 29 units. The water goes down, and the stream, the water coming off of a recently built church and a recently built housing unit has been directed into the stream at right angles by somebody that built underneath the bicycle path 2 places for this water to run off of their parking lots. And at right angles, it hits into this stream when it's bank full and running fast, creating a whirlpool that eats away the backyards. we've had a place north of us by a block that it went clear up to the eating away, went clear up to their back door of their home. We are housing units that are not homes, and we're far enough away from it, that's not a problem. But we've repaired the place 3 different times. I've had men from the Public Service Commission out there 2 years ago, last year, this year. They look at it, say, yeah, that ought to be fixed, but it's not on his list. Number 2 is we got another little problem. We have replaced that cement. We made a cement liner so it would flow freely. And it was tore up by the high water of the 8-inch rain. We've had to replace that once, and a pad that goes along the shoreline that doesn't let the loose dirt wash away. We'd like to have this taken care of with this bond issue if we can. I would appreciate your help, whatever we can do. We have brought pictures in to the mayor, and that was last week. And we'll try to hear from him and Councilman Robold. She's our first line of defense. Is there any questions?
Questions? Jane?
Specifically, you had mentioned before that the drainage problem is you said at 27th and Old Cheney? Is that where?
Well, it's a block it's right on the border of the 2 districts, yours and the one that meets you right there at 27th. And John, and John is not responsible, but because they're together, they don't get much attention.
Okay.
But there's a culvert there that, and it has always got water running down it. The water is flowing from the new shopping mall all the time, not continually. But it's not deep when it's not raining, but it's bank high when it rains.
Well, perhaps we can have Ben at the end come back up and maybe address that concern and where it's at on a priority list.
We surely would appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure. Other questions? Cindy?
I had a question. Thank you very much for coming today. When you talked about the things that we did, were you talking about you and your homeowners association?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that it wasn't you personally having to take care of that.
I didn't hear you.
I just want to make sure that you weren't personally taking care of that. It was you and your homeowners association.
Yes, I'm representing them, and I am a member of that homeowners
Okay.
representation.
All right. Other,
And that's it for
All right.
me.
other
More?
questions?
Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next testifier, please come forward.
Good evening. My name is Kobe Mack. I'm appearing on behalf of the Lincoln Independent Business Association, expressing concern about the timing of the stormwater bond proposal. First, we think it's very important to remind the public that LIBA has a very long reputation of supporting stormwater initiatives and bond initiatives in our city. However, this proposal is raising several issues. Number one, the current proposal does not replace a previous bond and therefore would result in a direct property tax increase. Number two, LIBA believes a stormwater bond should be considered by voters only after they know if the new city budget also contains a property tax increase or not. And number three, we believe the matter should be submitted to the public in November rather than May, so informed voters will know if there are other important city issues that require additional funding. LIBA first received details of the stormwater bond proposal early in February when we were approached by Councilman Eskridge. Councilman, thank you. Over the past few weeks, LIBA has concluded that the decision and the discussion would be better made in context with the pending city budget. To date, we have not seen a preliminary framework regarding the city's other needs, nor have we seen spending desires of the administration in the new upcoming budget. Approving the bond issue now will result in a property tax increase for each property owner in the city of Lincoln. And absent a discussion about the broader city budget, voters might approve a property tax increase for the stormwater projects, then this summer be asked by the administration to endure another property tax increase in the mayor's proposed budget. Blindly approving the stormwater bond issue without seeing the broader budget raises the potential for two separate property tax increases during one single year. We believe it's wise to try and avoid that scenario. We understand the 56th and Fletcher project considered in the proposal must have $400,000 in funding committed as soon as possible to ensure the availability of funds from federal and other sources. Because we too see the value in taking advantage of these funding sources, and because this particular project is so overdue, we propose and we support transferring $400,000 from the city cash reserves now to pay for this project. If you prefer another solution, we have an email from City Finance Director Steve Hubka in July of 2015 explaining our city charter requires us to reserve 10% of revenue in the budget as unappropriated funds. This means at the end of our fiscal year coming up this fall, we will have fund balances that could be available to fund this project. If you don't like either one of those ideas, we can come up with more. In addition to the timing, LIBA has serious concerns about including the cost of the emerald ash borer remediation in this bond. Reports show that managing the emerald ash borer may cost the city $2 million a year for the next 15 years, totaling just short of $29 million. When we asked how the administration intends to address these costs moving forward, the answer we got seemed to suggest there would be continued reliance on stormwater bond issues in the future. In fact, the memo states, and I quote, "Going forward, we would propose to ask the voters for additional funding through periodic stormwater bond elections," end quote. Clearly, we have stormwater bond issues then that are going to be brought forward again before you. We also know we can expect a $19 million bond issue in the next few years from Parks and Recreation.
1 minute.
Perhaps the emerald ash borer should be part of that bond issue. There's another $22 million bond issue coming forward in the next few years for the city library. Both of those are according to the capital improvement plan that's been approved by the council. In closing, we agree that it's possible the mayor's budget will not have a property tax increase. We would encourage the mayor to tell you today if that is the case. The mayor or his staff could put everyone's mind at ease tonight regarding more tax increases. However, absent such a commitment, we think the city council should at very least remove the $2 million from this bond issue for the emerald ash borer. And again, we believe we should take immediate action for funding 56th and Fletcher. I would be happy to answer any questions you have.
Questions for Kobe? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak, please come forward.
Good evening. My name's Doug Murray. I'm with Road Builders Machinery and Supply, and we're at the corner of 56th and Fletcher. And we've been there for 16 years, and we try really hard to be a good member of the community. But we just can't tolerate the flooding there any longer. So we've had water in our building 8 times in the last 15 years. And so since we've delayed this from 2012, we've been flooded 4 times. And we're not talking about a 1,000-year flood here. We're not talking about a 500-year flood. We're talking about a 2-inch rain. And so to live in fear of a 2-inch rain, we just can't tolerate that any longer. The urgency has got to be addressed, and it's got to be taken care of within these these funds that are matching, the tens and tens of thousands of dollars that we spend each time it floods. We used to be really, really proud to do business in Lincoln. And our employees, it's hard to ask them to endure much more when they lose their tools and their files and they lose their morale. Of course, you got to throw away parts, tooling. I mean, guys, you know, whether you have a business or not, imagine this being in your house and having flood 8 times. It gets pretty disheartening. So I'd like to get this out to the voters, get it funded, and put our #1 priority in our community, our neighborhood at 56th and Fletcher as soon as possible. Does anyone have any questions?
Questions? Cindy?
Mr. Murray, thank you for coming forward today, and I think we spoke last week. I recognize how important this is to you. How many employees do you have out there?
13 today.
And you said you've been flooded 8 times in the last 15 years. I'm sorry, you said you've had water in your building.
Right.
Okay, 8 times in the last 15 years. And did you report it to the city way back then?
Every time, yeah. Like I say, we try to, we understand that we chose the location. We love the location, you know, and it's been good to us, except for the flooding. And so I think it's the ditch, the stormwater is it's just outdated, and all the development that's happened east of us. I don't think that that it can't handle these short, intense rains that we have. There's too many rooftops, too many parking lots. There's not enough water held back, and the box culvert that's on Fletcher Street's just a choking point. It comes right into our parking lot, and it feels like there's absolutely nothing we can do about it.
Well, we love having you in Northeast Lincoln, and as you can see, most of the city staff also believes this is a priority project, and I'm glad to see that it's a priority project at this time.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming today.
Any other questions?
Other questions? Thank you very much, sir.
Thanks for your time.
Yeah. Next testifier, please come forward.
Good afternoon. My name's Rick Wagner. I'm here representing Lincoln Tool and Design. We're another one of the businesses at 56 and Fletcher that gets flooded pretty frequently. We employ approximately 43 people and put out a pretty substantial payroll. We employ mostly, higher tech type jobs. And, this becomes a real drag on morale out there when you have people that are expecting to do computer operation type jobs and program CNC cutting machines and stuff, have to come in, put on overshoes and start mopping floors and hauling out wet carpet and moving file cabinets around and throwing computers out and everything. So it's a real drag on business when you have to have that happen. Last year we had it happen twice, once in June and once again in September. And it makes it real difficult to be a good business doing that. We also have a 24-hour-a-day operation out there, and we have, most every time this happens, we have employees that are trapped inside the building, sometimes looking out through a glass door, seeing water 8 inches high in the door, and they're inside with it coming through. So, it's kind of a stressful situation for them. And, that water out there gets, 4 or 5 foot deep in some areas of the street. So I would think that would be a pretty significant safety consideration, too, for traffic driving into it. So there's just a real need for that to get done. There's a good opportunity with these FEMA funds available, and the city only having to pick up 12.5% of it. That's a bargain. And I'd just like to encourage you to consider passage of this. Any questions?
Questions? All right. Thank you very much. Next testifier, please come forward.
Good afternoon. I'm Mike DeKelb, 6015 Huntington Street, and speaking in favor of the bond issue. I'd like to kind of bring you 2 points of perspective. I'm the immediate past president and current board member of the University Place Neighborhood Association. And as one of the prior speakers pointed out, we've got a number of projects in the neighborhood that are proposed or on the list. Dead Man's Run floodplain covers probably the western 25% of our neighborhood, and 900 structures of businesses and residences, and you can imagine the long-term impact that has been on development and redevelopment of that part of our neighborhood. By the way, I should mention that the Dead Man's Run project is an NRD and a Corps of Engineers project with the city participating is also tied in, as the things should be, with the 33rd Adams and Cornhusker Highway RTSD package, because obviously that reconstruction, bridge replacement, the whole thing ties together. So they fit together, the funding's gonna fit together, the study is coordinated. But that's a big issue, and flooding in our neighborhood is very detrimental, and we're looking for all the bits and pieces to make it better, because we wanna improve. And we've got lots of growth projects coming down the pipeline, and this should be one of them. The second thing, oh, by the way, I wanted to mention, for Northeast Lincoln, the projects are spread all over town, but I want you to know that Northeast Lincoln is the bottom of the hill. There is 410 foot of elevation across Lancaster County, and the high points all exit at the low point by Waverly, where Salt Creek exits. Well, it exits Lincoln at Northeast Lincoln. So all your water comes down to us and passes on through, so it builds up as it comes. So if you see a few more projects in our part of town, it's because you gave us the water. So gravity gave us the water. The second point of view I wanted to pass along is I am a director on the Lower Platte South NRD. District 3 is my district, Northeast Lincoln, and up to Davie and Ceresco. I'm also the chair of the Urban Subcommittee. We get requests every month, often multiple requests from Lincoln for NRD assistance to help fund projects. And to me, this bond issue is your leverage money. It's your matching money. That's how when you come up to us with the projects, is yes, we have our money, please match whatever you can, and depending on the projects and how it packages with other funding sources, you guys get down to about 12.5% sometimes. Somebody else is picking up the rest of the bill. So from my point of view as an NRD director, we're here to help. You've got to come up with your money on your side of the thing to package that matching fund so we can be partners and get a lot of things done. And that's the points I wanted to make. So thank you.
Questions? All right, thanks for being here.
I have one.
Oh, go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks, Mike, for coming today. So did I understand that the Dead Man Run study is already in action?
It's in process. The study's in process. I believe this coming month there'll be the second public open house. The public open house that's scheduled at NET for the 33rd Adams and Cornhusker will be paired together with the Dead Man's Run. And
Thank you.
And the Corps will have some stuff. You're welcome.
Other questions? All right, thank you, sir.
Good evening. My name is Scott Josiah. I'm the State Forester and Director of the Nebraska Forest Service, and I'm also a resident of Lincoln. Thanks for this opportunity this evening just to talk about the stormwater bond issue. I'd like to talk with you about the substantial services that trees provide in stormwater interception and management, as well as the serious threat, which we've already talked about, of emerald ash borer and what it poses to our 14,000 public ash trees and more than 50,000 private ash trees in the city. Trees are the city's green infrastructure. We don't talk about that very often, but green infrastructure and hard infrastructure, they complement each other very well. During a rain event, the city's 64,000 ash trees alone intercept and store more than 6 million gallons of precipitation each event, water that never reaches the sidewalks or streets or sewers or drainage systems. It stays in the trees. So the trees reduce local flooding, which you've heard already, while providing a wealth of other benefits as cleaner water, cleaner air, energy conservation, wildlife habitat, and improved human health. So they matter. Lynn Johnson's already talked about emerald ash borer to some extent, but I want to reiterate a couple of key messages that are really important to understand about this bug. EAB, emerald ash borer, is going to cost Lincoln and virtually every Nebraska community a lot of money. nearly $1 billion statewide, with a B. Trees killed by emerald ash borer quickly become a risk to life and property and become legal liabilities. They fall apart very quickly after dying, and then they start falling on things. It's much easier, safer, and cheaper to remove a live tree than a dead one, especially an ash tree. And proactive action, removing and replacing declining ash trees now, will save the city money, will quickly restore the city's tree canopy and thus its ability to absorb precipitation, and the critically important environmental services the trees provide. A little story. Emerald ash borer was first described in Detroit in 2002. That was just 14 years ago. In 14 years, we watched this tsunami of green beetles roll over half of continental North America. A fact that really is kind of hard to understand. I mean, that's just a huge issue. To share a personal experience that I had to drive across, this past fall, I had to drive on I-80 from Lincoln to the New York City area. And it was really kind of a sobering experience because I had, from about Illinois east to the East Coast, it was nothing but dead and dying ash trees. That's kind of awesome to see that happen in just 12 years, 14 years. It's kind of amazing. But the message from that is crystal clear, and that is it is absolutely inevitable that EAB will arrive in Lincoln. We think it could be here already. It's all around us. It's right up close to our borders in Kansas and Nebraska, in Iowa, and in Colorado. It's all around us. We just have not yet detected it. It's a tough insect to find. It usually takes between 3 and 5 years to find it. Actually, I brought a sample of one for you.
First one.
I'll have to dig it out later. Nebraska's.
You're welcome to keep it.
Oh, okay. It happened. It's dead. So fortunately, we've used the last decade watching other states and their experiences to learn from their experiences and to figure out how to plan accordingly. And we think there are some lessons here. One is that most 70 to 80% of the ash mortality in a community occurs within 7 to 8 years after EAB is detected, because it takes about 6 years to find it in the first place. That concentrates and dramatically increases costs over a very short time period.
1 minute.
Quickly overwhelms community budgets and contractors and resources. You can't avoid dealing with EAB. It only increases and concentrates the cost. It's highly likely that EAB is already here, and ash trees, again, become quick liabilities. Some other cities are heeding these lessons. Denver has invested almost $3 million a year in emerald ash borer treatment, removals, and replacements, and they don't have emerald ash borer yet. It's only in Boulder, Colorado. They stand to lose 333,000 trees, so they take it very seriously. We stand to lose 65,000 at least. So these funds from this bond issue consider these investments that will likely slow the spread of EAB, and investing in this strategy now would provide Lincoln more time to spread out those costs, provide or permit preemptive removals of declining and hazardous trees, improve detection, and allow for immediate replanting. This is going to be a disaster for this city, just as if we had a tornado. This is one we know it's going to happen in advance. We can plan for it. Thanks.
Questions?
Glad to take any questions.
Questions? All right. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Next testifier, please come forward.
We appreciate the opportunity to speak with you tonight. My name is Derek Bookstrom. Also with me tonight is Brian Ager. We're with NUCA of Nebraska. NUCA is an abbreviation for National Utility Contractors Association, and we are in favor of the bond issue being on the May 10th ballot. We feel having the bond on the May 10th ballot gives the city a great window of opportunity to get this work going yet this year. If delayed to a future date, you'll lose an entire construction season, which would not be beneficial to anyone in our opinion. Further delay will continue the deterioration in the city's storm sewer system. Our local members see this deterioration every day working on your storm sewers. Brian, would you like to? like Derek said, we just want to thank you for your time today.
Could you
just a
state
couple-
your address as well?
My address?
Yeah.
8701 Colby
Thank
Street. God, you knocked me off my game.
I'm sorry.
Just from the economic standpoint, we see that, you know, we kind of ran some quick numbers, and this bond issue, we easily support 50 to 60 seasonal and full-time construction jobs. And we also, like Derek said, we, as being part of the community, we work on the infrastructure all the time. We were working on the infrastructure last year when we had the big rain, and we saw firsthand how the infrastructure deteriorated, and everybody knows how it's, you know, it's an important issue to keep in front of everybody. So we'd appreciate your time on that matter. Thank you.
Questions? All right. Thank you, gentlemen. Next testifier, please come forward.
Mark Rosso. I am on the Lincoln Engineering Partnership for the American Council of Engineering Companies, representing them tonight, the office out of the Cornhusker Marriott. A lot of passionate discussion about this, and we've been preparing for this bond issue for quite some time as an engineering community and a contracting community. As engineers, we're required to uphold several things, and one of those is public safety. And so I think I take away from all my laundry list of things and the discussion before us, that of public safety, in that deteriorating infrastructure and renewal and things like that are critical to that. Just to give the council a sense of the delay that could happen, there's been discussion about moving this to November. I don't think there's any doubt that the group here wants to put it on a ballot for the people to vote on. It's more of a discussion of when. And for example, if that were to happen in May, we'd have engineering contracts maybe in 90 days. We would start design in fall, maybe for bidding in late fall, and go into next year with projects starting in the spring, probably at the latest for some of the infrastructure projects. If this is delayed into November, we don't see engineering contracts done for 60 to 90 days. We get going in February, maybe March. You can see where that goes and falls into later and later in the year. So that put in perspective of public safety, I can speak personally to the culvert collapse on Fletcher Avenue, which was between 14th and 27th. I drive it every day. You know, I reported that to the CIC in about January or February. With the notion that, you know, we'll just let some folks know and they'll figure it out, and then pretty soon come out and look at it. And they did, and in fact it had failed, and there were several scrapes of bumpers and cars going over that particular location. That in of itself, you think, well, what's the big deal, public safety? Well, the answer is the road was closed for 2 months or 2 weeks. And so if we think about that in the context of ambulance service, fire, police, and safety, that's quite an extensive period of time to have to go around major infrastructure. So I think that's what the engineering community is concerned about, and that's our takeaway, I guess, from tonight. So with that, any questions?
Questions? Cindy?
Yeah, okay, so I'm sorry, Mark, thank you for coming today, by the way. Did you say that we should expect if the bond measure was put on the May ballot and passed by the people, that we would be not breaking ground until March of 17?
On some projects, yes, some of the larger design projects, that if we bid that into late fall, by the time we go through winter, some of those things can't be built in winter. We do have good winters around here, and occasionally we get things done, but not often. The ones that are ready to go could be bid right now. There are a few of those that are in process that are nearly designed that could be going this year as well. So that while that time seems short, it is actually rather long.
What are your thoughts on the 56 and Fletcher project?
That is definitely needed. We did a class with senior design as JEO. I'm a senior project manager there. And they came up with their own ideas about what we ought to do, but they all kind of came up with the same notion. The class, as well as all the engineering community, was that it's needed. It's flooding. We heard testimony to that effect. It can be definitely improved to a level of service that probably won't flood as much infrastructure or as much buildings in areas like that.
How soon do you feel like that project would be started?
I think, Ben, has the engineering been selected for that? I don't know if that has. There's been concept planning done to this point. I know that.
We have concept plans for that, but when we take that out, we'll have to go out for a proposal on that. That's over that $100,000 mark for the design on that. So we'll have to send that out and get qualifications for that. before we get and work on the scope before we get that out for design, so.
So when do you anticipate we'd be turning dirt on the project, or however you?
Oh, at the very earliest, it's gonna be a year. It's probably more like a year and a half. I mean, it just takes that long to design it. I mean, we have all the easements and right-of-way for that, but we know we have some encroachments on that right-of-way, so we're gonna have to work with people, and I'm sure there's some property we're gonna have to get, temporary or permanent easements on. These are large projects, you know, anytime you got $2.5 million $3 million project, you know, it takes time to do it. You just don't wanna go out there and.
So on this particular project, the time constraint seems to be on the match funding rather than the time to begin the project. Is that accurate?
Can you ask that again?
Thank you.
Okay, no. Can you ask the question again?
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah. I said, so on this project, the 56 and Fletcher, the time constraint is more on getting the matching or federal funding rather than being able to start the project.
Right, yeah, but I mean, this is the time to get that matching funding. We can't just sit on this for 6 months when that matching funding is not gonna be available anymore. If we say we're not gonna do it, they're not gonna wait for us, even though we've been waiting on them. That's just the way the federal government works. If we're not ready to go, they're gonna stop it. I mean, we're gonna have to give that project up, so.
Thank you.
All right, other questions for Mr. Rosso?
All right.
Thank you, sir. Next testifier, please.
Good evening, Glenn Johnson with the General Manager of the Lower Platte South Natural Resources District. Just to answer a couple questions maybe if you have them on Dead Man's Run. I know there've been several conversations here. Mike and Mike did a good job of describing the relationship on that project between the city and the NRD and the Corps of Engineers. It's a three-way partnership with the two locals providing 50% of the cost of doing the planning, and the Corps, federal government, providing the other 50%. We should be in the position of later this spring having the Corps come forward with their several alternatives, and I think they'll be previewed at this upcoming next open house. Once they go through that process, they'll select one of those options that's the best preferred option is what they call it. And then they'll go through the full detailed technical, economic, environmental feasibility studies that they have to go through on that particular study. And so we're probably, you know, a year plus away from having a project that is ready to actually get approved by, I think that the type of project this is, we don't have to go to a full-blown congressional approval for the Corps of Engineers funding, as long as the funding, the total cost of the project stays under $15 million, $12.5 to $15 million. And that's what we're working at, is trying to see maximize the amount of work we can get done in that time frame. If we can stay within that, we can move forward with the project and design, and probably within the next 3 years, we would be in position to construct that project. I guess any other questions on Dead Man's Run I can try and answer. The other thing I wanted to address was kind of the timing on the partnership that we have with the city and the timing on the bond issue and our budget process. Each spring in approximately May, the city and the Natural Resource District put together a working plan for the next 12 months under the interlocal stormwater agreement that we have. We supplement that each year. That outlines the particular programs and projects that would be worked on in the next year and funded. And then our budget process begins in, our fiscal year starts in July 1st. June 1st, we've put our budget together for the year. So a bond issue in May tells us what, if any, projects we're going to be trying to match in our budget in May. No bond issue and no funds available from the city side. My board's going to have to decide, whether or not they're going to wait, whether or not they're going to put money in the budget for joint projects that they don't have a partner on. So that's the timing that's critical
from a natural resource standpoint in the May bond issue versus a fall bond issue. If we wait, if it's to the fall and we didn't put money in the bond issue, then we're back into next May looking at putting what was in the fall bond issue in our budget so that we've got a match. So we just lost 6 months of potential time to work together as a partnership. So I guess any questions?
Questions? All right. Well, go ahead.
So we're considering a number of projects, and they've been prioritized for us based on severity of and significance of the infrastructure's problems, based on matching funds from organizations like yours at the NRD. And you've just mentioned how you're planning alongside us as a partner and others. Let's say only some of these projects were approved in the bond issue tonight, setting aside the idea that maybe this doesn't pass at all.
Mm-hmm.
If only some of them went forward, what kind of impact does that have on the NRD's projects that it's trying to get done?
The city has, well, the joint list has, we've been working together with the city on all the stormwater master plans, and the jointly work with them on setting the priorities in those. We have a 5-year planning process as the city has the CIP. And so we've taken from that list and populated them out over 5 years in our budget process, in our planning process. My sense is that they would budget, my board would probably budget for those projects either that they feel are ones that they can carry on forward without a partner that are critical enough, or only those that are funded, if there happens to be some funds in the city budget to move forward into the next year. But probably not the whole package that we would normally put, the $1 million plus that we would normally put in there.
So does your 5-year planning process shift into the future beyond those 5 years then for the sum total of your projects?
Yeah, it continues to move every year, so it's like a CIP. So.
Okay. Thank you.
Jane.
Glenn, a gentleman that spoke earlier had an issue with the flooding that's going on around 27th and Old Cheney and the Briarhurst Association. Is that on your list by any chance to deal with?
That one we've not been approached with, no, to my knowledge. There are a number like those that we do get approached with too, so.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to come forward and speak on this item? Okay, do we have some staff questions?
For Ben.
Okay.
Are you taking negative comments too?
Yes.
Later?
Why don't you come up now? And Ben, if you don't mind waiting, thank you.
Jane Kinsey with Watchdogs. You have heard from Liba, and they had some good ideas to present to you about how to handle this issue. I would also remind you in the last 3 weeks, you have had taxes and TIFs, which you have approved and which have take money from the taxpayers in one way or another. Watchdogs would like to separate out the issue of the ash borer. The director of the Nebraska Forest Service spoke earlier, and I hesitate to say who I talked to this morning for fear to get that gentleman in trouble. But he had a little bit different take on it. In addition, a watchdog from Greeley, Colorado emailed me and said that in Boulder, which is 40 to 50 miles away from Greeley, they have found the ash borer. The Greeley Forest Department is not concerned. They are recommending planting trees near ash trees, so when if the ash dies, there will be a replacement. It takes 3 years to see the effects of the borer on ash trees. In addition, I talked to, as I said before, another gentleman with the Nebraska Forest Service. He told me that it has been found 30 to 40 miles away in Iowa and Missouri. They have had workshops speaking to individuals here in Lincoln and also to community organizations, one of which is Lincoln. I don't know whether they spoke to Lincoln or whether Lincoln went to the workshops. Their recommendation is to remove unhealthy trees now because the treatments of trees is bad on the environment. There are stress trees in Lincoln right now. He suggested that in these workshops, he reported, I should say, in these workshops, that communities spread their budgets out for responding to the ash borer. So there's no urgency for doing this at the present time. I emailed the mayor about this, and Mr. Hoppy apparently answers questions from the mayor. We've had a back and forth about this. Watchdog sees this as adding the ash borer at this time, project money, so forth, as political spin, that it's not necessary, it is not urgent, and therefore it should be removed from this bond issue. Now, I will let you speak about the stormwater bond issue and learn about that yourself. In our opinion, it should be separated out. One of the ideas that LIBA presented was, and that we had thought of also, look to the next budget, which is in the summer. You can add money at that time. This isn't something that needs to be handled right at the moment. So it's not good for the city to add this on to it, or for you to add this on. Now, the Lincoln Journal-Star was not kind to the Republican members of the council this morning in the paper. I hope you will not consider that in making some decision. Their opinion does not represent the taxpayers. That's their personal opinion.
Time.
And so I urge you to separate this out. Consider LIBA's suggestions as appropriate, and we would support that. Thank you.
Questions for Jane? All right. Thank you very much. Next testifier, please come forward. No other testifiers? All right. Follow-up staff questions. Larry, did you have one? Oh, Jane. Yeah.
This is for you, Ben.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you address the gentleman's concern about the flooding that he reported in his neighborhood, in the Briarhurst Association? Was that brought to your attention?
It could have
previously?
been.
Okay.
I mean, we go out in the field quite a bit, and
Okay.
to be blunt, I don't remember, and that would be my fault. But I will take a look into it, and if you want to, I will copy you or anybody else who wants to be copied on that phone conversation. And
Gone.
and Teresa, you probably have his address. Okay, and I'll get the address from Teresa, and then
Mhm. Okay.
copy copy you and Mr. Camp, so.
That'd be great.
Sounds like maybe in both areas.
Okay.
That'd be
I know
great.
we've been out to Briarhurst, but it might be a totally separate Briarhurst, and we actually did a project because it was part of the storm drainage infrastructure, drainage infrastructure, but sometimes these are on homeowners association property and not city property. So we would not, we usually don't get involved in those, so.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? All right,
Okay.
follow-up staff question?
Yes.
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'd like to ask you the same question I asked the NRD
Okay.
general manager, and that is, if if none of these if this was not to be approved, or if only partial list was approved, what does that mean for your work, for the city? We've talked a bit about the costs, but can you please explain just mechanically what would then happen? What does that do to the CIP?
Well, they get pushed down the road. I mean, if we don't have the funding for them, we don't have the funding for them. You know, especially, you know, we have done some November elections, but we kind of like the spring ones better because, I mean, it literally does take quite a while to do all the engineering for these. And if we can get these out to bid in the winter, I mean, that's a really good bid time to do those and get those out for bid. You know, if we try to push those during the peak of the construction season, usually the dollars come in higher for the construction cost. So it just delays things, and sometimes we'll lose funding for them too, so.
Okay. Then I have a question for Jeff.
Okay.
as well.
Yeah.
Yes, Jeffrey Patrick, City Attorney.
Thank you. We heard from the forester about liability. We deal a lot with those questions and often about trees. Can you speak to whether or not we would be faced with increased liability if the emerald ash borer problem does not have an adequate funding source, does not get addressed? Can you talk about what kind of liability we face?
Sure. And we have kind of the repeat issues that come before us in claims, potholes, and trees are part of that, whether it's and one of the things we look at when we see claims is a city tree, and then the next question is, if it's a city tree, was it foreseeable? And a lot of times it's not. You'll have a weakness in a tree, but the branches aren't dead. There's no, you do periodic inspections of the street trees, and you don't see anything wrong. Then you get a big wind, and you get a big branch falls down on somebody's car and crushes it or whatever. That would not be the defense if we had 10,000 trees across the city that are dead. I mean, those trees are dead, they're brittle. If we don't get them cut down before they fall on somebody's car, then we're paying for their car, because we can't argue, well, that wasn't foreseeable that a dead ash tree would fall on your car, because it's pretty clear that it's dead. So that would be a liability issue. In addition, although we don't have as many trees in parks, as Lynn was talking about the parks, I was thinking we might have to close off sections of parks with dead ash trees to keep people from coming underneath them and being at risk.
Okay.
Roy?
And just to follow up on that idea there, you mentioned that would have prior notice or something. Usually we talked in past council meetings about prior notice. Does this mean we could have one notice for the entire city with all of the ash trees, or do we have to report each one? And I would compare that to the potholes, because you could reasonably expect 10,000 potholes in February.
Well, there's a legal principle about knew or should have known. And I think if you've got a tree that's been dead all summer long, there's no leaves on it, even if it wasn't reported as dead, if it's a street tree, the argument would be we should have known it was dead because it was so obviously dead, even though nobody had directly reported that tree.
So, but the same does not apply to potholes, just checking.
Well, yeah, we don't know of every pothole. If there's 10,000, it takes a while to get around to them, but.
I want to ask follow-up questions, because that would seem to fly in the face of everything that we've done as far as the Tort Claims Act with prior notice. I mean, prior notice is on an individual item, not for a broad scope of the city. I mean, I think we're treading into some pretty precarious water if we're saying that our notice is the entire city having some sort of issue with every tree.
Well, I understand your concern, but I'm not sure that we've had an issue that's come before us like this, where you've got thousands of trees dying within a short period of time. Think about potholes, for example. you have a number of, we've had situations where we've had maybe 1,000 potholes to spring up within 2 or 3 days because of the freeze-thaw cycle. But then when you look at the reports and you look at how quickly we filled those potholes, we filled them within 4 to 5 days at the most. So we've responded, even if we have 1,000 potholes, we've responded very quickly to take care of that problem.
But we're also getting notice of where those problems exist, right? I mean, we're getting notice that those problems exist in we're reporting them. Citizens are using the app to report them. You know, it kind of. I'm not following the logic here because I don't think that that's what the State Tort Claims Act asks of the citizens to report those types of issues. I think they want them to report them on an individual basis so we know that it's the tree at 40th and A and not the tree at 33rd and Cornhusker. I mean, you see what I'm saying?
Well, I do, but I think you have to understand the legal principle. If we should have known about a tree, the fact that nobody reported that tree because they reported 2,000 other trees, I mean, it's a matter of what do we know and can we reasonably have addressed the problem. With potholes, we look at when did we know about them, did we reasonably address those potholes? And that's a situation where we generally manage to control that.
But when we have claims come up, we say, hey, we didn't have notifications, we didn't know. I think we're applying a different standard here.
Well, if you have somebody that comes in and says, well, yeah, but the mayor has driven by here every day for the last 2 years, I think he knows about the pothole, I think that's a different situation than we have with your average pothole claim.
John?
I think we need to really stop this because you're our city attorney.
Yes.
And you're talking about liability of the city, and I think that's a real sticky wicket. We've heard other testifiers, foresters, and everyone talking about this is a 15-year issue. This isn't like the tree is dead and tomorrow's going to fall.
Right.
And so, but your words could be used in a court of law to implicate the city, and I think that's very dangerous. And just your last statement about the mayor driving by someplace should have known about the pothole. We had a West O situation about a woman whose tire was ruined. On West O, if we don't have at least 5 or more trucks go by in a morning or vehicles that are city-owned, and they didn't see that. So again, I think we need to back off on this and not get into scare tactics on liability. This is an emergent situation, but it's not like it happens overnight. And I think we need to rationally address this. But let's be careful what we say here, because in a court of law, this is a very dangerous thing to talk about. And so I think we need to back off and just say, you know, we want to do the responsible thing. I don't think anybody in this room, citizens, council, mayor, or anyone is not saying that. I don't think you're suggesting that either, Mr. Kirkpatrick, but let's be very careful, please.
Cindy?
Yeah, just one question to clarify.
Yes.
Jeff, we don't have any evidence that there are any trees dying from the emerald ash borer in Lincoln right now, isn't that right?
Oh, I think that's definitely true, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Carl?
Jeff, procedural question. If we do not pass this resolution tonight, this will not be on the May ballot, is that correct?
Right, under our election law, we have to get the certification that the ordinance passed to the election commissioner tomorrow on March 1st, or it doesn't go on the ballot.
Okay, just curious, don't know if you know this, but what would that date be and to get it on the November ballot?
You know, I don't know that off the top of my head. The date that sticks in my mind would be sometime in September, but I haven't researched that yet.
I think our bond council is signaling it's September 1st.
Okay.
Yes.
That's why he makes more money than I do.
Yeah. Other questions for Jeff? All right.
Just one more staff
go ahead.
Donna, can you come up, please?
Donna Garden, Public Works and Utilities.
We had a question that came up in discussion about whether or not the recent flooding situations that we've experienced and for which we put together an emergency relief program would be, if those kinds of situations would be aided by this kind of a bond issue and the projects that are done. Can you speak to how this stormwater bond would potentially prevent the kind of impact that we saw in the last May and October storms?
I think we talked earlier when we had those storms that there is infiltration from various places, and one of the ways it can come into the sanitary sewer system is from streets. So the streets are flooding. It's certainly, if there's any leakage around a manhole or in the manhole lid itself, that water can go directly into the sanitary sewer. So there is an impact if we can reduce the flooding areas in trying to keep that water out of our sanitary sewers. And certainly if businesses or residences get flooded, that water is going down the sewer in their basements, just like it would if you were running a hose down there. So certainly an impact.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions for Donna? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Others?
Yep, Rick Hoppy, please, could you come up?
Hi.
We had some suggestions for other ways to pay for the emerald ash borer problem that we face. Can you speak to the other funding suggestions that we've been asked to consider, and what how likely that those funds might be available, or
well, I think the
effective
primary
misuse?
problem with using any of the sources that are recommended is we still don't know the answer to the $5 million question of the police fire pension. We have a committee appointed by Mr. Fellers and Mayor Byler that's looking into that, and as you know, the actuaries have recommended that we may be short as much as $5 million a year. So I would suggest to all of you that if those funds are available for another purpose, that they may be needed for the pension. And that's the trouble that we face with any of this. We don't know the answer to that question, but we need to proceed with this election in order to ensure that we do not lose the opportunity to leverage NRD and federal monies.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Thank you. All right, any other staff questions? All right, we'll move on to the next item.
All right, next is item 8, accepting the report of new and pending claims against the city and approving disposition of claims set forth for the period of February 1st through the 15th, 2016.
All right, is there anyone here this evening to speak to a claim? Please come forward.
Just wanted to make a brief note. There'll be an amendment that will come before you to take one item off of the list of denied claims. That's not something that happens very often, but we had a claimant. We were prepared to deny it. We were contacted by an attorney who said he had further information to provide us. So we're asking you to take it off the list until we're provided that further information and we can further evaluate the claim.
Which item is that?
That's Ms. Claudio, her claim.
Okay.
It's not coming up for a vote now, but I just wanted you to have notice of it.
Great, thank you.
I have
Go ahead.
staff questions about one. I received a phone call from Mr. Hoppy over the weekend
Yes.
on his denied claim. And he told me a story of how this damage occurred. And he's perplexed by why it's denied. And if his story is true, I'm perplexed why it's not being approved also. Are you familiar with this?
I'm somewhat familiar with the claim. His claim, and he's basically submitted it as a property owner. His claim has to do with, I can't remember off the top of my head whether it was fire or police.
It was police.
Police, and you had a call coming in about someone, a life-threatening situation.
Mm-hmm.
And so they responded. No one came to the door. They broke down the door, is my
Well,
recollection.
the story I was told was that the police responded to a call at the next door neighbors. And there was an incident there that included some violence, and that the lady in the home, there was no reason to expect from their perspective that the police did not need to enter her home. Now, she wasn't there, and so the door was kicked in, and that's what this damage is for. You know, I want to get to the bottom of this, because if the story I'm hearing is true, what that means is if the police respond to my next door neighbor's house and then decide to kick in my door, I have no recourse. And so I would like to remove this item as well from John Hoppy Jr. until we can all find out what the exact story is and work with the LPD to figure out exactly what happened.
We would be happy to provide you with more information if you want to make that motion, withdraw it from the claims list tonight. I think that would be appropriate.
Okay, do that in the voting.
Yep.
Okay. Anyone here to speak to a claim? All right, we'll move on to the next item.
All right, then, next is approving a resolution requiring the annual publication of total wage and salary information for City of Lincoln employees.
Okay, I think, Jeff, we talked about this earlier. Do you want to just review this for the council?
Apologize, I was distracted by thoughts of the other claim. This is a resolution that was brought forward by Councilman Christensen, and after some discussion, his goal, of course, was to provide pay information for Lincoln employees. And after discussing it with several of the city directors, I think the idea was that the most efficient way of doing that was to make it available to media, somewhat similar to what the Omaha World Herald has been doing for a number of years. I don't know when they started, but they do this for Omaha city employees. They do this for Lincoln school employees. They also do it for Lancaster County employees. And so the information that is provided is for people working for the city making over $50,000, provide the name, the department, their total salary or wages. For people making under $50,000, it would just provide a description of the position and their wages.
All right, any questions? John?
No. Well, I guess I'd ask both of you gentlemen, you mentioned Mr. Kirkpatrick making it available to the media, and that's what the resolution says. What about having it posted on our website?
The intention is that once this passes, there would be a link on our website that would take the person to either Data Omaha, which has been publishing this information for years. Matter of fact, they're even publishing our city county health department information because the county publishes it. And Lincoln Journal-Star has expressed interest in having that on their website. So essentially the cost to the city is almost nothing. That's, you know, the estimate is zero that I was given because we'll just be providing the information, and the Journal-Star and the Omaha World Herald will be actually posting it and hosting the website that does that. And we just have links from our city website.
Would it be, I'm concerned too for our employees, would it be in a protected format so that somebody couldn't, not that the media would have any ill intentions, but to accidentally transcribe it wrong or something? So, I mean, what they get is...
We provide them with that information.
So it couldn't be changed, like a
Right.
PDF form or something?
We would certainly trust them not to change it.
Well, I
but-
suppose, you know, accidents can happen, but once they receive it, and they can get it now, I mean, they could file a Public Information Act now, obviously, and get it, but this would be something we'd offer for them on an annual basis, so they could have it provided to them without even having to ask for it. We would hope they wouldn't make mistakes with it.
Other questions? All right, thank you. Anyone wishing to speak to this item, please come forward. All right, next item, please.
All right, next is item 10, special permit 04016A, appeal of Derek Schroeder and Derek Zimmerman from the Planning Commission's conditional approval to construct a multi-story, climate-controlled indoor self-storage building and increase the allowable floor area to 197,200 square feet on property at Northwoods Drive and Colby Street. I would mention to the council we have had a request to continue public hearing and action for 3 weeks to March 21st.
All right, we have the request to continue for 3 weeks, but if there's anyone here this evening that would like to speak to this item, we'd invite you to please come forward.
Good evening. Andrew Willis, Klein Williams, 233 South 13th Street here in Lincoln. I represent the Northern Lights Townhome Association on the appeal filed by Derek Schroeder as the president of the association. We don't have any opposition to the delay in the rescheduling. I just wanted to make sure tonight that some of the members of the association and the owners who were here had a chance to stand up and just make sure that it was noted that we had a few people here. Otherwise, I'll hold my comments until later.
Okay, and if they'd like to speak, we'd invite them to come forward and speak if they'd like to.
Great. So unless you have any other questions, I'll wait to speak till later.
John, question?
You had them stand up. What is their position on this measure?
Oh, sorry, yeah, opposing the special permit.
Okay,
So the association is in opposition of the approval of the special permit, not opposing the delay of the scheduling the hearing.
Okay. Other questions for Mr. Willis? Carl?
Yeah, Mr. Willis, has there been some formal action that the association has taken that could be presented to us?
Other than filing the appeal?
No, just action that they've taken opposing.
Oh, as far as I don't have anything in front of me. There was a petition.
Okay.
I can get that.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Other questions? All right.
Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak this evening, please come forward.
Good evening. Brock Zopke, 2000 Connor Place. I'm in the District 1 with Ms. Lamb, and I'm in opposition of the construction of this storage unit. This unit would be directly behind my residence. It would impact property values, resale, can see an increase in theft in the neighborhood. There is approximately 26 units that directly back up to Connor Place and Connor Street that would have view of this location, as well as roughly 40% of the neighborhood that would have either a view out of their front direction as well. Just feel that this area is more, with it upcoming, growing, is that this should be reserved for dining, entertainment, shopping, something that would benefit the growth of this community. These profits that would be made by this organization will be removed from the community, and there will be nothing beneficial to this community. A homeowner down about 3 doors from me had purchased land to build a single-family home outside the neighborhood, went to put his house on the market, had an offer on it, and after they discovered this unit was being built or was in the process of going through the motions, is that they pulled their offer immediately. Now, my concern is that this is not even built yet, and if it would, this would have a very negative implications to my property values and my neighborhood property values. I am a former board member of the Northern Lights Homeowners Association, so I do feel for the other neighbors in this. Unfortunately, a lot of them couldn't make it due to family and work obligations, but I hope that we have all your support in the opposition of the construction of this multi-level storage unit. Thank you.
Cindy?
Just want to thank you for coming out tonight, taking your time to come and testify, and let those others know that we're going to move it to the March 21st date at the request of the petitioner and with agreement of Mr. Zimmerman. So
Would this would this be to a 3 o'clock meeting, or would this be available at another 5:30 meeting?
It would be at 3
It'd be a
o'clock.
3 o'clock meeting.
Is there any way to get it at a 5:30 meeting?
We could delay it to a 4th week, I guess, but that would be probably the only way to make it a 5 o'clock meeting.
That would be the 28th of March.
Yeah.
Thank you.
thank you.
Doesn't matter to me. All right, anyone else wishing to speak to this item? All right. Do you want to just move it in the voting
In the
session?
voting session, sure.
Okay.
Also, the attorney for one of the parties involved is here. Would you like to comment on whether or not the 28th or the 21st is relevant for your involvement in the case?
Good evening, Danae Kalkowski. I'm the attorney for the applicant, Dino Storage. We didn't talk about the 28th, so I can't tell whether they're available or not. I presume with maybe that much notice, we'd be able to be available, and I know he was willing to give the time needed to try to work through this. So if that worked better for the council and for the neighbors, I think there probably wouldn't be any problem with moving it to the 28th.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. All right. Anyone else wishing to speak? All right, we'll move on to the next item, please.
All right, next is item 11, approving an agreement between the city and Nebraska Department of Roads for a federal aid project grant in the amount of $600,000 for the implementation of a bike share program.
David Carey with the City County Planning Department. Here on behalf of the agreement that is before you today, happy to say that we have been awarded $600,000 from the Nebraska Department of Roads. With that, we had an obligation to put together a $150,000 local match. From the beginning of the process of trying to get a bike share program up and running here in Lincoln, starting with a workshop about 18 months ago, we have had the strategy and the goal to provide the local match as well as ongoing operational and maintenance needed funds from non-tax dollars. We've been successful to this point. This local match is coming from sponsorships that have been agreed to. Those sponsorship agreements formally will be coming forward to you as well in the near future. The step taking tonight is to have that agreement with the state to move the project forward to a bid process so that we can get the project off the ground this year still. So with that, I think I'll just answer any questions that you might have.
Questions? John?
Yes, we discussed this a little bit the other day at the pre-council, but could you address the fact this would be a 10-year obligation on the city's part, accepting the NDOR monies, as I understand it?
Yes, and to be clear, it would be on the portion of the program that would be purchased with these funds would be under that 10-year window. And the point there from the state is that they want to try to maximize the dollars that are going into the project. So it's a mutually good idea to try to maximize those funds and the equipment that we get from this. But for this phase of the project, it would be under that 10-year window of agreement. If we did future phases without federal funds, we wouldn't be under that requirement.
Okay, and I guess my question is, we've got a 10-year time horizon, we get good enthusiasm up front, intentions, sponsors, but then suddenly that disappears in year 3, 4, what have you. What is the potential liability to the city?
If there was a complete lack of funding and we had to suspend the program, which of course is not the intention here, we have confidence that it will move forward. If that were to take place, there might be some needed correspondence with the state to talk about what type of reimbursement of the federal funds that would have gone into this. Again, we don't really expect that to happen, and that would be the purpose of the program, is to maintain the viability of the program moving forward.
But if we make a 10-year commitment up front, we're really committing, aren't we? I don't know how you could go back to NDOR and say, gee, we don't have money, so it's a one-way agreement. It seems like we would be held to that on this initial phase, and I guess the other day you said there's at least anticipated $200,000 a year in operating costs. And I just want to understand what the potential liability, it's a worst case scenario, but it's kind of the lawyer in me, I guess.
Right,
just
sure.
want to know if things don't work out, what are we committing to today?
Sure. It is a 10-year agreement that we're committing to, and it's those $600,000 in federal funds. This is not atypical to many of our other federally funded projects that go forward. So if we accept those funds, we have these types of agreements with the state when we're using those federal funds. So that's not atypical as far as how we would go into those agreements as a city using those funds. We are committing to trying to make the best use of those funds over that time period.
But the sponsorships are not obligated at 10 years. Those are more, short-term, 1 year or what have you?
Currently, one of our sponsorships is going to be a 3-year agreement. Another one will be a 2-year agreement. Another one will be a 1-year agreement. So it could vary depending on what the level of interest is from those sponsors. To be clear on that part of it, the ongoing work of a vendor that we would ultimately be hiring to do the program, to operate the program, one of the main purposes of their work will be to go out and procure those ongoing sponsorships. That is what they will be really hired to do, so that we have that ongoing incoming stream of revenue. I would also point out that there'll be a chunk of money coming in on a regular basis from user fees. So there is a piece of this that will, ideally, we'd like to try to make this as much self-funding as possible. We don't think it'll get to 100%, so we will need to get the ongoing sponsorships to be part of this model moving forward.
And just briefly, could you review the number of bikes and the user fees you're anticipating on an annual basis for those bikes?
Sure. We anticipate the first phase here, which will be what will be funded with this grant, to be a 15-station, 100-bike program, possibly more, depending on what the bids come back in at. We anticipate, we have conservatively anticipated about a $200,000 ongoing operational fee It could very well be less than that. We're being very conservative on this to make sure we have the revenue and the money in place to do this. We have upwards of 2 years of that operational cost already covered with our existing sponsorships, as well as the $150,000 match that we're talking about tonight.
And then the ongoing, though, revenue that you anticipate the renters of the bike, what are you estimating that to be?
Right now, we think the low floor level of that would be about $30,000 a year. And that would be, I think we're going to be looking to our vendor and others to think about creative ways to make sure that we increase that amount.
Thank you.
Other questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak to this item, please come forward. All right, next item, please.
All right, next, public hearing ordinances, second reading, item 12, approving an amendment to the master site lease from the city and the county to the Lincoln-Lancaster County Public Building Commission, an amendment to the master lease agreement from the commission to the county and the city, and the issuance of the commission's tax-supported lease rental revenue bonds.
Good evening, Mike Rogers, Gilmore and Bell Bond Counsel to the Public Building Commission and the city.
Scott Keene, Emeritus Investment Board.
The ordinance in front of you would authorize the Public Building Commission to issue its bonds in the principal amount of not to exceed $16,100,000 for a couple of projects. It's a requirement under the Public Building Commission organizational documents that they get approval of the City Council before a financing of this nature. The projects being funded with these bonds are renovation of the former Lancaster County Jail located at 605 South 9th Street to offices for use by the county and the city, as well as renovation of the new County Mental Health Crisis Center located at 825 J Street. That's the former Benish building. The ordinance would authorize a First Amendment to a site lease agreement and a First Amendment to the lease agreement so that those properties would be drawn into the Public Building Commission financing document structure so that the bonds would be issued on a parity with the other outstanding Public Building Commission bonds. The Public Building Commission has taken action on this. They've adopted a bond resolution to authorize the issuance of the bonds. So now we're here to ask for the City Council approval, and the County Board is expected to take action on this tomorrow at their County Board meeting.
Questions? All right. Thanks, guys.
Just very quickly, I would say we met with the rating agencies last week, and we fully expect that Moody's and Standard & Poor's will affirm their existing ratings for the Public Building Commission. Moody's currently rates the Building Commission AAA, and S&P rates them AA+. Our hope is to go to market as quickly as we can. We've actually scheduled it for Wednesday of next week. So again, to try to take advantage of the current market conditions, we're moving as quickly as we can to get these bonds to market, and these bonds will be sold at a negotiated sale.
All right. Any other questions? Thank you,
Thank you
gentlemen.
very much.
Anyone wishing to speak to this item, please come forward. All right, next item, please.
All right, next is item 13, amending the pay schedule for the employee group whose classifications are assigned to the pay range, which is prefixed by the letter M, by reestablishing the pay range of M56 and assigning class code 3017 to the existing battalion chief classification for those employees working the 56-hour work week.
Good evening, Council. Doug McDaniel, Human Resources. The purpose of this ordinance is to reestablish a pay practice and pay grade called M56 to be used exclusively for Lincoln Fire's battalion chiefs, those individuals that work a 56-hour work week. The history behind this was prior to 2012, all the battalion chiefs worked a 56-hour work week and aligned their schedules with the same as the firefighter force did. Then in early 2012, Chief Huff at that time reorganized the battalion chiefs to a 40-hour work week, hoping to get some administrative efficiencies out of that group. And now Interim Chief Linke would like to retreat back in some fashion to put 3 battalion chiefs back into the 56-hour work week, so we have to reestablish this pay plan.
Questions for Doug? All right. Thank you.
Just for the record, can you speak to whether or not there's any fiscal impact of this change?
Thank you. There is no fiscal impact at all. There are no added FTEs, no added salary expenses at all.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Other questions? Right?
Yeah, let me
Yeah,
just,
go ahead.
why do it? If there's no change in terms of hours and fiscal impact, what's the necessity?
Well, what it is right now is we have all 6 battalion chiefs working a 40-hour work week. So they're not working in the same configuration of the firefighting force. 3 of the battalion chiefs will work a 56-hour work week, and that will align them directly with the areas of the firefighting force which they will oversee. That's basically it. It will give some continuity, better communications to between the battalion chiefs and the firefighting force, you know, their captains and the firefighters in those station houses.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? All right, thank you. Anyone wishing to speak to this item, please come forward. All right, next item, please.
All right, next is item 14, amending Title II of the Lincoln Municipal Code relating to officers, departments, and personnel by adding a new section numbered 2.04.060, requiring the reporting of contracts to the City Council, and adding a new section 2.18.080, requiring the pre-qualification of firms providing services to the city.
Jane.
Well, this ordinance was introduced after a tremendous amount of great dialogue from my colleagues up here about the importance of increasing transparency to our constituents about exactly what professional services are being bid, what professional services are being awarded. And I think in response to some of the comments that you read in the letters to the editor, they say the public deserves to know how its money is being spent. Right now, we do have a process. We have a process in place. It's been enacted through an executive order. And this executive order mirrors lots of municipalities across the United States on how they review contracts, how they bid contracts, how they let contracts out. So we have a process in place, and we know this process works because our city is thriving. And that is indisputable. We have a great process in place, and it works very well. This ordinance would give some teeth going forward to all future city councils and future mayors to institute reporting. And this ordinance calls for reporting on a monthly basis, those contracts for professional services that have been transacted for going forward. And I think that's something that was missing in this discussion. We say we want to increase the transparency, we want to increase the accountability. And I think this is clearly a step in the right direction, and I think it's something that we all agree on. And I know that John has been such an activist on this issue, and John deserves a lot of credit. And I think John is going to be discussing an amendment to this resolution. I know the proposal before us is on a monthly reporting, but I'm going to turn it over to John, and if John would like to speak on his.
Well, yes, I've got what's going to be called Amendment 2 that I'll be introducing to this, and it'll be a substitute amendment, probably. And it actually contains language that was in my legislation this fall, word for word, but it's just limited to the reporting area and the pre-qualified list that Ms. Raybould has put in her legislation. The two major differences are it would be weekly reporting, and secondly, under what Ms. Raybould has proposed, that would be after contracts are let. Mine would call for prospective, letting us know, prospective reporting, so it would be out there so we know what's coming down the pike. And I sort of call it, if you just get it after the fact, that's sort of like hindsight versus what I'd like to see as true oversight. So we have an opportunity just before the ink is dry on a contract. So that's what I'll be doing. And then I know Ms. Raybould and I are going to be discussing things the next couple of weeks. And my understanding is we're going to delay actual action on this for, I believe, 2 weeks due to some for the convenience of the council and also for people to study my amendment too.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, questions for either Jane or John?
Just, I guess, thank you, John, for bringing that forward today. And would you be open to having the purchasing department review the language, if they haven't already done so, to give us some feedback on it?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
All right, anyone wishing to speak to this item, please come forward. All right. Move on to the next item.
All right, next is,
Have anything else to say? Okay, thank you.
all right, next is item 15, approving a real estate purchase agreement between the city and C Street LLC for the sale of city-owned property generally located at the southwest corner of Superior Street and Lewis Avenue.
Members of the council, David Landis, Urban Development Director, the applicant in this case. And now that the minor matters are off the table, we can get down to the business of the day. $62,000 for a couple of lots up in North Lincoln. This is land that we've owned for 45 years. It was donated to us, and it's been off the tax rolls for 45 years because the hope was this might be a location for a library. And when that proved not to be true, the Lincoln Public Schools said, oh, maybe Goodrich Junior High would like to have some additional space. Both of those have changed. There is no desire for a library at the location. LPS has no interest in the property. It's been on our website for over 2 years. We've had 2 expressions of interest. One that we followed up considerably, and they found that the limitations on this land was sufficient that they rescinded their interest. One of the reasons is that there is a 24-inch sewer here that pushes the setbacks this way. There is no access along Superior, which means this lot is essentially landlocked. And there is a covenant on this land that says the only thing you can do with it is single-family home ownership, unless the whole neighborhood agrees to the contrary. So there are unique limitations on the land. We have a purchaser at $62,420. Our real estate department says that's legitimate, given 2 things. One, there are several restrictions on the land. Number 2, this is raw land that will have to have new utilities, and you'll have to essentially create a street system that goes this way and this way before this land will be usable. It's also the only other offer on the table. It's been there for 2.5 years, and we should get 5 or 6 houses on that area. If those houses were valued at $150,000 or $160,000 apiece, the valuation might be about $1 million. That would make us $20,000 a year in taxes, and it hasn't been doing anything for us for the last 47 years. We'd ask for the adoption of the sale of the land.
Carl.
Thank you. Mr. Landis, this land was given, you say, for a potential library. Does that mean that the proceeds from the sale of this land should somehow go toward libraries?
It doesn't, in that, to my knowledge, all land goes to, the sale of it goes into the land acquisition fund. Now, when a department has been responsible for some land, I think it is broken up by those various departments. But in recent years, I think there have been city agendas that have used the land acquisition fund. So it certainly wouldn't be available for library operations. It might be susceptible to being delineated for library land expansion. But even if that's the case, I would say that when the city has needs for land buying, if you've got money in 3 other departments and no money in this department, but you really have a critical need, the city can do that.
All right. Just wasn't sure how we were tied. Thanks.
Other questions? Cindy?
Okay, so I was looking at the fact sheet, and when I looked at related annual operating costs, it said 221618 real estate taxes. Is that what it's projected to generate, or are those taxes that have been being paid?
Well, we have been in an argument with the assessor. The city has been called upon by the assessor to pay taxes on non-civic land. I do not know if we've been paying those monies, and I'll ask.
So
I'll get back to you on that. In which case, we're not only mowing it, but we're also paying taxes.
And I
if
guess
that's
my
the case.
question went back to whether it's the library fund that's being paid from, or which part of the city is paying for it, if in fact we are.
I will say this, that in talking to the real estate folks, they didn't mention that to me. What they did mention to me was that they thought that there are maintenance costs in lands that we own that have to be mowed. So that's as much as I know. But if you'd like me to, I'll see if I can find out on this.
Thank you.
John? Go ahead, John.
Mr. Lance, just out of curiosity, the C Street LLC has a managing partner of Marcus Tooze. Is there any need for disclosure in that relationship or anything?
No, other than I think, well, not I think, I know he has the pleasure and delight of being the husband to Nicole Fleck-Tooze. I think it's his primary achievement in life. That's what he seems to communicate to me, and I don't think he has to disclose it. I think he stands on the top of a mountain and sings it whenever he has the chance. I know I do with the case of my wife, and I bet it's true for Marcus as well.
Okay, well, just so the public knows, his wife is an employee of the city, is in the planning department, so.
Parks
Department. I'm sorry, she kind of moves around.
Well said.
Thank you.
Other questions or mountaintop standings? All right, thank you. Anyone wishing to speak to this item, please come forward. All right, we will move on to the next item.
That concludes our public hearing. We can move into the voting session.
Let's do.
All right. Number 7, directing submittal to the voters of the city a proposed general obligation bond issue for construction of improvements to the city's storm sewer system at the May 10, 2016 primary election. I will note for the record, we do have a motion to amend number 1. This was introduced by Eskridge.
So moved.
Second?
Second by Jane. Cindy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'd like to give Teresa an updated motion to amend, please. Thank you.
You have copies for us?
Mr. Chair, I move to amend the 1630 R33 in 2 respects. One, I'd like to amend to substitute the attachment 1A that I am passing down, which represents the tier 1 and 2 priorities given to us by the Mr. Higgins, absent a number of things that were withdrawn, including the Emerald Ash Borer and the project that doesn't have any kind of master plan, the Irvingdale project, and a couple of others. And at the same time, to amend section 1B and section 2 of the resolution to strike the proposed bond amount of $9.8 million and insert the proposed bond amount of $6 million. I'd also like to amend section 1A to strike the words include but shall not necessarily in line 6 and add the letter capital A in line 8 so that the line 6 through 8 will read improvements, quote, end quote, shall be limited to some or all of the improvements, betterments, extensions, and measures generally described in attachment 1A appended hereto and made a part hereof by reference.
Second.
Second by Roy. Discussion. Jane?
I'm kind of curious as to your reasoning for striking some of the items that you called out. In particular, the items that are Stransky Park and in Irvingdale, which happens to be in my neighborhood and in my district where I see flooding occur on a routine basis in some of these areas. So I just was curious why you happened to particularly strike that one.
Yes, thank you. And testimony today was that there is no master plan for that. There's no plan at this point for that particular project, and so I struck it accordingly.
Could we get some staff clarification on that? Because I guess I wasn't Just want to make sure that we all understand if that's true.
Yes, that is not part of a, well, actually it is, and that's entirely my fault. It's, because usually parks are not part of a master plan, but that's part of the South Salt Creek master plan that's in. I mean, that's normally, I mean, this is actually the first time a parks have been in that area in the master plan, and that's my fault for not neglecting on that. But I mean, it is part of a master plan. But we always do a parks project because, I mean, we feel they're needed to do, and I mean, they're really, the neighborhoods really like them, and I think they're a good project to do. We've done a lot of parks projects over the years. Antelope Park, Terrell Park, Herbert Park, all over the city. So, well, I mean, we feel it's an important project. And that's entirely my fault that I didn't let you know that was a master plan. But it is in the South Salt Creek master plan.
And Ben, can you talk about the match that is listed there?
That match there is 50% NRD, 50% city. I think that's on the list right there. Okay.
If I can, I might also mention that there is a master planning effort going on for Rudge Stransky Idlewild, and it will include stormwater improvements, and the channel improvements as part of that. That effort, we just assembled the funding to get that work done, and there was some localized flooding there that happened this last season that we'd like to address as well. The channel is, as you saw the images, and if you were out there, the channel needs to be reshaped, and both water quality and the safety of the channel needs to be addressed. So that's an important project.
To be honest, and normally though, we don't have parks in the master plan. Usually the master plans look at major creeks and channels, and we've always done the parks as a separate item, and they're usually not in the master plan. This one just happened to be one that was in the master plan.
So would you be willing to I guess, reverse your deletion of that item in your proposal?
Well, I received correspondence from outside staff that indicated that there was nothing planned for this particular area. You're saying it's in a master plan that doesn't usually include parks?
Well, most master plans we usually don't include parks, but this was part of we did South Salt Creek Basin. We did the South Salt Creek study, and so it was included in that. And I think there's a lot of confusion here because the NRD has another plan that they're doing, or the NRD and parks, and I think the homeowners association, I mean, they're calling it a master plan, but I wouldn't really characterize it as a drainage master plan. I mean, it's not the kind of one we normally do. So there's been a lot of confusion on that with that homeowners association one, and I think the NRD is cost sharing on that for about $5,000. So I mean, that's really a conceptual master plan that looks at drainage and other items on that. Ours looks really just at drainage in a more detailed way. So.
And I'm sorry, what was the $5,000 you mentioned?
The $5,000, there's an NRD is matching with the homeowners association and possibly with the Parks Board. To be honest, I don't know much about that one at all. So.
I apologize, I probably am creating part of this confusion. There is a separate master planning effort. It is a park master plan, but as part of that park master plan, we're going to be addressing the drainage channel as it extends through that area. And Ben is correct. The NRD has provided $5,000 toward that master planning effort in part or significantly because of this drainage channel that runs through that area. The rest of the funds are either coming from the department or they've been donated at this point to do the master plan.
Okay, and just to follow up, you said that every year you do a parks project. So was this parks project already budgeted for this year?
We with Watershed Management have a prioritized list of channels that we'd like to address. This is one of the next projects on that priority listing. We don't have any funding specifically identified for it because it is, we anticipated that it would potentially be part of the next stormwater bond issue.
The priorities that we were given, Ben, said this is a project that's essential to obtain funding from the bond, either because delay or not doing it will cause continued economic losses. Is that
Well, again, that's the same thing. I mean, if you weren't on the tour, but if those were on the tour, I mean, you could see it was deteriorating. The more it deteriorates, the more the bank fails. I mean, just the more expensive it's gonna be.
So how close is this project to being taken on if we pass it in a May stormwater bond?
So if we pass this in the May, what's that?
If the people pass it?
Oh, okay, if it does pass, then what we'll do, we'll go out and we'll do the design on that. So, I mean, the design on these normally take about a year to do. And so if we can pass this in the bond election, you know, that gives us a good chance to get a start on that next spring or next summer.
I just, want to point out that it is in the tier 1 of priorities. And if you saw the map and see where these channels are cutting through the neighborhoods, it's one of the densest neighborhoods in our city, surrounded by lots of residential property. So I would like you to reconsider removing it from the tier 1 of your priorities that were established by the stormwater bond issue.
I'll accept a friendly amendment to put that back in and change the amount to $6,300,000.
Thank you.
I mean, is it fair to ask what other projects are being taken out of tier 1 and tier 2? Because I mean,
There's a number out of tier 2. It would be great to go through those one by one.
Excuse me?
Page 3, it looked like the Haynes Branch projects. I was gonna ask Ben about those projects.
Go ahead.
Okay.
I'm trying to keep some order here.
Yeah, all of the tier 3 are eliminated from the list that I passed forward. And then the Haynes Branch, which are grade stabilization projects in phase 2, totaling $350,000.
Okay.
But then could you tell us about the Haynes Branch, those two projects?
Right, so these are actually watershed master plan projects that were in the Haynes Branch one that was approved, by this council, I think, back in 2015. So these are the two higher priorities ones we have on Haynes Branch. So these are ones sitting on Haynes Branch on the south side, and they're where trails go by through that area there. And so these are ones that are fairly high up in the watershed master plan priority list. And these are one Parks asked us to take a look at. We had a meeting with Sarah Hartzell and the NRD and the county, kind of figuring out, trying to prioritize, what we needed to do for that. And these came up. I mean, they didn't pop up as high as those South Salt Creek ones, that you see up there in tier 1.
Other questions for Ben? All right. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Any other discussion on the amendment?
Actually, Ben, I do have questions. Can you take us through tier 3? It's gone from this amended version, this proposed amendment. So can you help us understand what falls away?
Okay, so what falls away is citywide inlet repairs, and I know we have this ongoing discussion on maintenance, our larger type cost. So these was just to go through, I mean, we've got a list from maintenance on kind of the inlets that need to be done, and and so these includes those inlets on there. I think there's about 100 so on each side of town, and this was just a list that they started out with. They're going to come up with a lot longer list eventually, but these are just inlets all over town that we're trying to do. And so, for example, the first ones we were going to do were the 48th and Cotner area. I think there's about 24 inlets in that area where they're having, where you can go by and see the rebar and they're cracking up. And so we just need somebody to take a look at those a little closer, because sometimes you just don't want to replace the top. You want to replace sometimes the vault, like when we went out there on 33rd and Holdridge. A lot of those actually the entire vault needed to be replaced, or maybe just the front wall. So anyway, so we want to do some engineering on that. Of course, there's the Emerald Ash Borer, which we've talked about quite a bit. Floodplain, flood-prone area engineering projects. So that's one of those that we've been working with Parks over a long term. And I know not everybody agrees with it, but that's like that Spring Creek corridor out there. So a lot of times when you have an opportunity to go out and buy property or acquisition, or somebody's willing to give a permanent easement on that or wants to sell it, so we'll pay for the flood-prone areas parts out of this. And so we've been actually having this floodplain, flood-prone area engineering projects. That has been on the list. That has been in this bond issues for the last several years. And so that's worked out pretty well. As I said, buying property that's in a floodplain and keeping that in the floodplain, that's actually a very good floodplain management practice. It helps us with our community rating system, which we've talked about before, that provides, we're one of there's not that many cities that have a class 5 rating or better, so that gives everybody that's in the floodplain that has flood insurance at 25% reduction. So having land that's in the floodplain, that's kept in the floodplain, that's always a good deal. The water quality projects in there, that's 500,000. That's just, to be honest, we have always done this in the past, and I know that's not everybody agrees with that, but we do these in coordination with Parks and the NRD and some other community entities. We've actually cost shared with developers on these to do water quality projects in the past.
Could we go back to the
Sure.
the CRS rating that helps provide a discount to flood insurance holders?
Yep.
Who are these flood insurance holders?
So right now, we at one time had about 6,000 flood insurance holders. I mean, we have a lot more properties than that in the floodplain, but we have about
Citywide?
Citywide, we have about 6,000 people that have
property owners?
property owners that have flood insurance. Not everybody in the floodplain has flood insurance, because if you already own the property and you're not paying on a loan, I mean, you're not required to have flood insurance. You're just required to have it as part of a loan, and almost everybody's federally backed these days. And so we don't have 6,000 anymore because of the Antelope Creek Valley project. We have about 5,000 flood insurance holders. So, and as you probably already have heard, and you probably get calls from constituents, floodplain are skyrocketing because we're really deeply in the red. And so even though it's not Nebraska causing the problems, it's more Louisiana, Texas, you know, and those places down there, I mean, they're just skyrocketing. So this helps a lot, you know, having a 25% reduction in flood insurance. And what this does is, so the community rating system, I mean, it just gets more and more complicated. I mean, because what they do is they give you points. So every 500 points you have, you get a step increase in rating. It's just the way they rate it. So, you know, the more stuff you do, the more floodplain management practices you have, the better rating you get. This just helps with that.
Do you know where these homeowners' businesses are roughly in the city, geographically speaking?
Oh, everywhere where there's a floodplain. So if you have a federally backed mortgage and you're in the floodplain, you have to have flood insurance. Unless you're somebody like the city or a big business where you're self-insured.
Roy?
I'd also like to point out that all the funding for the Emerald Ash Borer issue has been taken out in Cindy's amendment. I think it's the ash trees are the right issue. I think this is the wrong funding mechanism, and we're entering into a biennial budget season, and I'm committed to finding the funds, but I don't think this is the right way to find them. I think Cindy has put a lot of work into this, and it represents what I consider to be the art of the middle way. Everyone gets something that they want, and nobody gets everything they want, and with that, I call the question.
Okay.
I have
So
a couple more
calling the
questions.
question is a priority motion. So calling question, we'll vote on calling the question.
This is for motion to amend number 1. Raybold?
No.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
No.
Fellers?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
No.
Lamb?
Yes.
Motion carried 4-3.
Okay. Debate on the main motion, or discussion on the main motion.
Or her amended, her
Yes.
amendments.
Yeah, we're now on the main motion.
I have a question for Ben.
Go ahead.
I know that there is a reduction in the citywide inlet repairs, which I see going on all across our city.
Yes.
Where are we going to get funding for this ongoing repair and maintenance program? Is it already in? Do you have a certain amount already in the budget, or is this one of the standard funding mechanisms that have been used in the past for all 11 bond issues prior to this?
No, this has not been used before to fund inlets. When Mickey was still here, this came up last year sometime. We have a ton of inlets. They're a major problem, and actually we are doing things because when we build new projects, especially on arterials, we're doing what's called we're putting metal fronts on them nowadays, and so you can see that in a lot of new areas in town. So that helps out a lot, but that doesn't help out with the old infrastructure. So a decision was made last summer along with Mickey, and Mickey said, well, we just don't have any funding mechanism for it. You know, let's put some money in the bond issue to take care of these. And so that's where this came from, was to put this in the bond issue. But we have not had this in the bond issue before. I felt it was a good idea to include in the bond issue. But I'm not aware of any other funding mechanisms for them right at this time.
John?
I would just say this is my classic
Yeah.
snowplow target, and I'm glad we're starting with the metal fronts.
Yeah.
Yeah, it hasn't happened before, and I think this is a big issue we need to be talking about. And I've been wanting to really address this for months. I think in our budget time, we ought to talk about it, because it's not just
Right.
1,000, I mean, they're all over the city.
They
It
are,
is-
yeah, I agree.
And we've got to do something with our design and construction methods and just get away from these. But this is not the time and place to do that. But I'm glad everyone's concerned, and let's look at this in the very near future.
Carl?
I'm concerned about what we're doing to ourselves and to our citizens in this community. We have a department of experts who have been working on this issue for, no disrespect, but much longer than Cindy has. And we have solutions here where the city is essentially a 50-50 stakeholder with the NRD. Our city tax funds, property tax funds go to address issues that are real. Just explain the Haynes Branch issues and how that impacts the trails. The trails failed majorly last spring. We're spending thousands and thousands of dollars now to rehabilitate them. Fortunately, we had some FEMA money that's helping out there, but there's a need with that. We're looking at trying to acquire property to do a major addition to our trail system. This would remove funding from that, again, 50-50 match with the NRD. Looking at engineering projects, we're passing on a cost to property owners for their flood insurance, and I hear about the huge rate increases of flood insurance, and we're not helping with that issue. We did hear a testimony earlier today that water in this community flows northeast. That's an area of the city that needs help. The water quality projects, again, a 50-50 match with the NRD. We heard from the NRD that it's important for them to know we're in the game with them. We do have the ash borer issue, and I'm willing to give on that one, but I just feel like these issues are important to us. It's part of our plan for our stormwater issues. We need to do this. And I would recommend, in fact, I would move that we include the whole package, removing the emerald ash borer.
Second.
Second by Jane. Discussion? Cindy?
Thank you. We can't wait on a number of these projects, and the Northeast projects have been a long time coming, and prioritization is important. We also heard that the bond that passed in 2012, now the amount of that was $7.9 million, and included in that was money that was intended for some projects in Northeast Lincoln. The money isn't there today in order to put towards these projects. The money has been used somewhere else, we don't know where. I think it's important that the people get exactly what they expect, prioritized in the way that it is prioritized, and that we be able to track where that spending goes. I absolutely do not agree that we should include back in the tier 3. I think we should work on the priorities 1 and 2 that we have as they're listed in the new attachment 1A, and we should move forward with this, get it on the ballot, let the people vote on whether they are willing to pass a $6.3 million bond issue.
Other comments? Jane?
Well, I too am dismayed, and I think Carl was very eloquent about this, that, as city council members, we have to be good stewards of our taxpayer dollars. And in our community, there has been overwhelming support for the last 11 stormwater bond issues. Why? Because we care about the maintenance of our city. We care about the maintenance of our infrastructure. We have always been a very proactive, forward-thinking city because it improves the lives of our citizens, but also it's a public safety issue. That one area at 48th and Cotner, if we don't take care of that area where there is water, it floods and it impacts the road right there at 48th and Cotner. You can see the road is deteriorating because of past water pooling and ponding there. This is a concern to me. We have to do our jobs. We have to do it as diligently as we possibly can, and being good stewards and being always thinking about how we can make our city better for our future generations, but also better for our existing generations. I think if we had more of an opportunity, we hear about flooding everywhere I go. I can't tell you, since I came on the city council, the very first issue was the sewage backing up in people's homes because of the low-lying areas. Every neighborhood association meeting that I've gone to, they talk about flooding. I just had a meeting last Thursday with Lincoln Public Schools talking about flooding in a neighbor's backyard. I swear we get at least 2 to 3 calls a month dealing with flooding issues. And I think we're missing a wonderful opportunity to take this full measure out to our voters, to ask them how they feel about improving their cities. And I guarantee, and I'm so positive and confident that our voters in our city would say, we want to vote for these improvements because it makes our city better. And I think by shortchanging this, we shortchange our citizens, and we shortchange the benefit that we can be bringing to our citizens.
Other comments? Larry?
I agree with what I think Carl summarized very well, the obligation we have as public servants to be looking out for the best interests of our constituents. I would add that I suspect many of our constituents don't know what a CRS rating is, but we do. And we know that it has an impact on the costs that 5,000 property owners may pay related to flood insurance. Like it or not, our community has many, many places throughout our city that are in the floodplain, and part of our job is to look out for those people and their bottom line. I'm also just disappointed in the process as it's unfolded today. We were not, as colleagues, aware of the details or even that there was an amendment until tonight. And in learning that there might be, I specifically tried to ask questions about what might happen if some of these projects are not included. I didn't know which ones to ask about because I had no idea which might be struck. I was hoping that you might ask specifically what would happen if these projects weren't included, so that the people out there watching, so that people in our city know what trade-offs we're making on their behalf. Yes, we may put this before them on the ballot, but we're making a big filter here that it can affect homeowners and business owners. We're filtering down these projects, and that affects real people. And I think that having that kind of full discussion and not necessarily cutting off that discussion the way discussion was cut off tonight is healthy for this body or healthy for our city.
Cindy?
Sure, just a quick response. Couple things. This itemization is not going to be part of the ballot. As was testified to, the ballot just generally says, hey, will you approve a $6,300,000 bond under the amendment? Also, I want to point out that maintenance we shouldn't have to go to the people to borrow money and have them incur debt for maintenance. We should be taking care of that as we go. And so that's why a big part of Tier 3 is gone. And with that, I would just ask that we call the question.
All right. Question's been called.
And this is on
Carl's amendment. All right. Call the roll on Carl's amendment.
Raybold?
Yes.
Camp?
No.
Christensen?
No.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Fellers?
No.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
No.
Motion lost, 3-4.
Okay. Discussion on the main motion.
Mr. Chair, can I ask for a point of clarification, because I'm concerned that the numbers are not adding up? Could someone please review what is being taken out of the $9.8 million, just so we're on the same page? And I apologize for jumping out here. I realize this is out of order. But from right now, what I've added up is all of Tier 3 is $2 million. The additional $1 million out of Tier 2 for the Emerald Ash Borer is $3 million. Now, I understand both the Haynes Branch pieces in Tier 2, which is $350,000, for a total of $3.35 million. That should leave the remaining amount at $6.45 million, if I've done any sort of math right. If I'm mistaken here, please correct me. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page.
I think, is there another item that's missing?
And I may have missed it, and forgive me for even jumping up. I just want to make sure we're doing what we needed to do here.
In Phase 2, eliminated Emerald Ash Borer for $1 million. Phase 2, Haynes Branch for $110,000, and Hayes Branch for $240,000. And then we added back in, I believe, the costs of the storm bond at $250,000.
Okay.
If the dollar amount you're looking for is $150,000,
yes,
I think it's urban drainage studies in Tier 2.
Okay, that has been removed.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes.
Is that in your tally?
No, it was not, and that hits it, and I apologize for interrupting. I just want to make sure we understood what was going on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Discussion on the main motion.
She called the question.
But we already voted on
Oh, that, okay.
Okay, so yes.
Lyrian.
From what I understand, there are two parts to this amendment, and one of them is removing projects, but the other is changing language about what happens if certain projects that are intended to be done are not able to be done. And by changing it from include but shall not necessarily to shall be limited to some or all of these improvements, betterments, and extensions, it looks as though we are constricting the work that will be done on stormwater mitigation. Is that correct?
Very correct. I mean, we've never had a bond issue passed with that language, and I'm begging you not to do that, because that really, I mean, you're really constricting what we can do, and if an emergency project comes up, you know, we're not going to be able to do it. I mean, we're not like the Department of Roads where we have a ton of engineers and we spend a ton of time doing these, and I mean, you're taking away urban drainage studies, you know, and this is one of the studies we use to figure out what projects how we're going to prioritize projects. I mean, we have areas of the city we haven't even studied yet.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, really putting that in there really limits us. You know, if something comes up, we're not going to be able to fund it, even if it is a storm drain project, so.
Other questions of Ben? Jane?
Cindy, would you consider removing the language that you have added that we further restrict the use of the funding to allow the departments to do their job?
I would not consider removing that, and I think tonight's testimony is exactly why. The people should be able to get what they expect they're paying for. And if there's additional bond money left that needs to be redirected, it should be redirected to the repayment of the bond, in my estimation.
We did hear testimony from our bond counsel that the practices in Lincoln are commonplace in other cities, municipalities. Government is often asked to operate like a business. This is something that will constrain and make it much more difficult for them to be fluid in response to the different revenue streams. They will not be able to act like a business with this kind of language in place. Are you sure you want to leave this here?
I think there's unencumbered funds that can be used in cases of emergencies that the city is able to draw from. So yeah, I want to leave the language in.
Where do you think those are, those unencumbered
Well,
funds?
my understanding was there was at least $9 million as of 2012.
So, if I ran my business like this, I'd be out of business, by the way. You know, when I budget for something, I budget for something. And to saying that you can't change it, you know, that makes sense to me. You budget, you spend it what do you budget it on? If you don't spend it, then you put it back into the pool.
I mean, we're a city. I mean, we got nature, we got people. I mean, it's just so many variety of inputs and so many ways things can go wrong. You know, this is the way, I've been here since 1991. You know, I took off time to be a consultant. I mean, we've always operated, we've always done a fairly good job. I mean, I know it sounds from what people say that we haven't done, you know, we've known about projects for a long time, but we've had these projects, we've had a lot, and we have a lot more projects on the list. And this just ties our hands for people, People have voted for these. They want us to do projects. We do the projects. It's worked in the past.
Jane?
I have to tell you, I deal with the capital investments for our company, and there's no tighter tightwad than myself, certainly when it comes to budgets. And I am a stickler for budgets, and I make sure that we adhere to the budgets because that's how we can continue to grow. But I must tell you, when it comes to capital investments, if there is a crisis, if there is an emergency, if there is a legitimate need, we reallocate those funds that have been earmarked for a store, for example, or for a project. And we redirect those funds as needed, as every household does. If there is something that comes up that needs to get done, if somebody grows too much, somebody needs to buy a new pair of shoes, you can't help these things. Every household manages their budgets, and as a government, we have to manage our budgets. But we also have an obligation and we have a job to do to make sure we deliver that value to our taxpayers, and we make good, wise decisions on a daily basis. And restricting our departments in wisely being the stewards we know they are capable of being, and handcuffing them on making very wise decisions on behalf of our constituents is not a good practice for any business or for any government.
Other comments? Hey, Ben, one real quick.
Sure, yeah.
At the end of each fiscal year, we do a transfer ordinance that has a lot of roads projects in it from Thomas and others.
Yeah.
Do you seek the same thing?
No, we do not. I mean, when we have the bond issue, I mean, that's that bond issue. And so, like I said, you know, without the urban drainage studies, and even when we do those, we have approximate costs. So we move the dollars within there. So some projects are more, some projects are less.
Okay,
So we do not go through a transfer ordinance.
being able to move them between project or into new projects that might arise, maybe maybe you have another project, you would come to us to ask any sort of, or even notify us if you were moving something within your budget.
No, we do not do that.
Okay.
I
Why
mean,
is
that's
that?
because that's the way the bond is written, that where we can move money we can't move money out of the bond into another bond issue, but we can move money within the bond issue. I mean, we've been doing that. I mean, ever since every bond issue, we do that.
This might be
Yeah.
a question above what you could probably answer. If we pass this, and maybe this is a question for Jeff, if we pass this with this language in it, would there be the ability for the council to decide on that, for moving those funds around?
Well, and it may be a question that's more proper for bond counsel,
Yeah.
but I can give you my more affordable answer. You can check with bond counsel and make sure. But if your question is, can you move it from the projects that are within the bond ordinance to something else, can the council do that? I think the answer is no. Because when the voters vote on it, they're setting those parameters, and that's why the general approach of bond counsel is to make those parameters relatively broad and flexible so that the subdivision has the ability to spend it most cost effectively.
But the department could still move those funds around within the projects that are listed.
Yes,
Okay.
within the projects that are listed. I don't think there's anything that would, within the new language, as I understand it, and I haven't had a chance to review it, but as I understand the language, they could move it around within the projects that are listed. I mean, the projects are not approved with specific budgets attached to them where, okay, you can only spend $200,000 for this project.
Right.
That gives them the flexibility within those projects.
Okay. John?
I think generally what we're seeing here is a little bit of a belt tightening. And we have operated, and governments operate in sometimes where they budget for things, and then later that gets shifted around. I think we're trying to get a higher level of accountability. Now, last year, last fall, after the May and fall floods, we came up with $500,000 to $1 million we set aside from emergency funds to help mitigate that situation, or help compensate homeowners and so forth. So it's not that there aren't emergency funds, but let's just tighten our belts a little so we see that things are spent for what they should be, and so we have the accountability and the transparency. And I think this is a step in that regard. It's not a huge amount of a reduction, and on top of that, we do have our budget session coming up here, and I think that, you know, proceed with these projects in this bond, and then in the budget time, let's talk about others. You know, let's talk about the maintenance, as Mr. Higgins said. This is the first time we've put inlet covers in there, and I've been harping on inlet covers for close to a decade that we've got to design better, and finally, 2 years ago, we get the metal guards. But we've been creating things, but maintenance isn't a bond type item. You pay for that as you go, and that's where you need to have those sufficient funds. So that's how I view this. I'm proud to say we're going ahead with a stormwater bond here to address items that are important. Unfortunately, we have a little bit of a disagreement on some priorities, but let's be careful and look at the good side of this. We talked about the CRS rating there on flood insurance. This doesn't mean you're gonna lose that. I know years ago we had a deal, gee, if you don't get more fire stations, your homeowner's insurance is gonna go up, and because of the fire protection, and that was not true. You know, so let's just back off a little bit here and understand we've got a good community. We're addressing a lot of concerns here, and I look forward to a meaningful dialogue during our budget session to look at things. I want to look at a long-term plan on Emerald Ash Borer. That's a $30 million project over the next 15 years. Let's look at how we're going to do it so we know what the track is, not just a $2 million bite, but we know the whole thing. And so I'm excited. We have a lot of good opportunities ahead of us in the next several months.
Larry?
I'm glad you brought up the budget process, John, because we do have a process that allows for transparency and a lot of public input in prioritizing these projects, and that's our capital improvements program. We've got the Planning Commission that reviews all of those projects. All of those projects then come to us during the budget process. So when we face circumstances like Ben Higgins has described, where we might not have the federal match for a project intended as a priority project for stormwater, Ben looks at the next project in the capital improvement project list. It isn't arbitrary. It's the opposite of arbitrary. It's intentional, and it's been publicly approved and vetted by the people who testify and come to our taking charge process, to our budget hearings, and before this body. So, you know, it sounded, Trent, like you were concerned about there not being a chance for the city council to weigh in on priority projects, but we do have that ability, and we use it. So
I was talking about the dollars. I was talking about the movement of the dollars. That's what I was talking about.
And if the movement of the dollars is, if it's moving because one project isn't feasible anymore and it moves to the next project, I'm sure that we could get a report on that if we wanted. Go ahead, Ben.
Well, it's just some projects cost more and some projects cost less. I mean, some of these are smaller projects. So it's just, I mean, we move them within the bond. We don't move them out of the bond. And there's some areas, like sometimes we set aside something for parks, and then we try to make sure that we keep within those boundaries, so.
And what I'm trying to say is that I think it's very predictable where that money is going based on the fact that these projects are all publicly vetted and in a big list in a spreadsheet.
Other comments? Carl and Jane?
Yes. Before you sit down, Ben. Okay. How firm are these figures that you have here?
Some are pretty good figures, you know, where we've done some of the design, you know, a little further along the design, and some are not. I mean, for example, the parks one, the Stransky, Rudge, Irvingdale Park, I mean, that's a soft number. We haven't done, I mean, we did the master plan area for that, but that's really a concept level cost on that one. So that one we don't have a really, some are good firm and some aren't firm. Yeah. You know, we just, the way we've always done the projects, we just try to get a mix in there, and we just, you know, we're just, like I said before, we're not like Department of Roads where we think about it and then get finer and finer cost. I mean, all that costs more money, you know, to do all that, trying to get a more detailed cost. And then when you're taking out things like the urban drainage studies, that's one of the studies, that's that $150,000 in there. That's one of the dollars we use to try to get better costs for that.
Yeah.
So.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
I'm not done.
Go ahead.
Okay. I appreciate John's reminder that to be positive, because I think it is, it actually is a good time to be positive, and I appreciate Cindy's moving forward in this, because there are some really important projects, critical projects. One of the ones I think of the most is a pretty small dollar amount here, but a West A project that if we don't do this, if the citizens don't pass this, that puts a delay on a road project that's needed right now. And there's going to be a huge apartment complex going in out in that area if that's approved, and exacerbating the traffic issues and needs there. So I just think this is really important that we go forward as best we can. I would ask, though, I just feel like that we need, our staff need some flexibility. These numbers aren't solid. In some cases, the last 18 months, we've had huge floods in the community. So things happen, things change, their needs, and for us to say, this is the script, this is how it has to go, that's difficult, very difficult.
Jane.
Well, I do appreciate the opportunity to continue to work together in a very positive fashion. And I always like to go back on some of the great recognition that the city of Lincoln has been receiving. I'm just going to go over 3 of them. But there's 2 that are really important. And I carry these around with me because I am so proud of our city and what we have done collectively as citizens to keep improving our city. This is one from Culture Trip. Lincoln ranks #1 of the 10 most beautiful cities in the United States. The state of Nebraska tends to evoke images of rolling hills and rugged landscapes, but the city of Lincoln is a modern diamond in the rough. It boasts high-end shopping, beautiful parks, museum, and bustling nightclubs. But here's the one, and I'll just stop at 2 because there's like pages of these amazing comments of how we became the great city that we're getting recognized all across the United States. This is a really, I think probably the most stellar recognition. It's done by MSN Money Magazine. #4, we're ranked #4 as the best run city in the nation. #4, best run city in the nation. I certainly like to think it's not because of the great elected officials. It's because of the phenomenal staff we have in the city of Lincoln and Lancaster County who actually know what they're doing, who have the foresight and vision to plan for future generations, and having to deal with future city council and other elected officials. I just want to commend them because we got this #4 ranking from MSN Money Magazine, not because of anything we did. It's because of all the things that they have done in bringing to our attention these important bond issues. And I want to give a shout out to all the citizens in the city of Lincoln because they're the ones that vote for these bond issues. They're the ones that recognize that and trust our city employees to make those great decisions on either shifting the money to the appropriate projects that need to get done in a timely fashion. So again, I appeal to you, Cindy, if we could strike that language that you have put in to give them the flexibility they need to continue to do the amazing job that they do to get this great recognition that they deserve.
Go ahead, Cindy, and then
I
I'll have Jeff come up.
I am committed to making sure the Northeast projects get done. These are in the Tier 1 priority, Tier 2 priority. I don't want those funds to be shifted and disappear to other broader or other projects. I'm committed to Northeast Lincoln. I'm glad to see that the city staff is now committed to that being a priority. And for that reason, I believe that these funds need to be applied only to what the citizens of Lincoln expect them to be applied to. The citizens don't get a list. And so it's our job to make sure that what has been listed here as priorities is protected and completed. And with that, I would call the question.
I'm going to go to Jeff first. I know it's a priority motion, but it looks like he has something in his hand that we probably need to hear
I just wanted to respond to your question you asked earlier, Trent, which was, could you, under the language as amended, could the city council make changes? And the answer is no. Mike Rogers did give me some language that I think makes sense that would give you that opportunity if you wanted to. You'd have to amend the current resolution, but if it said, shall, without further action of the council, be limited to, that would mean it'd be limited to just these projects unless it came back before the council and you specifically chose to shift it to another project. So that would be an option you could consider.
Tell me the language one more time.
Shall, and then you've got the strikeout, include but not, shall not necessarily be limited to. It should be shall, without further action of the council, comma, be limited to.
So moved.
Second.
Seconded by Jane.
I
Discussion
think
on
you
that.
want a comma after the word shall, too. Shall, comma, then
Yes.
introduce your clause.
Discussion on that amendment.
Can Jeff explain the process? So if Ben has the staff brings to our attention a project that is not necessarily outlined in the list, how does that occur?
Well, for example, if there's an opportunity for some share costs that would move a project up the priority list, then he would come back before the council and ask permission to use some of the funds from this bond issue for that project, but it would be within the discretion of the council. The council could say, no, we don't want it spent for that purpose.
Cindy, are you okay with that?
Yes.
Marian?
I just want to add that it's dangerous to think of these projects as having strict district boundaries. We heard tonight that gravity flows to your district. I think it's important to recognize that the projects being contemplated tonight citywide also benefit your district. Any improvements we make throughout the city have the opportunity to keep water out of the homes and businesses in Northeast Lincoln as well.
All right. I think there's a good compromise here.
Thank
I appreciate you
Thank you.
coming up with that language on the fly. That was very nice. Let's call the question on that motion to amend,
Change that language.
to change that language.
Change the language and not necessarily vote on the total amount
Right.
of
Yes.
the amendments.
Yeah, and then we can vote on the regular motion after that. So, thank you. Teresa?
Raybold?
Yes.
Camp?
Reread this clause again, just like. Say comma.
Shall, comma, without further action of the council, comma.
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Fellers?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
Okay. We're back on the main motion. We've talked about it quite a bit. Do we want to just go ahead and vote on the main motion, or is there more discussion?
Trent, could you clarify what we're voting on is, well, could you do it, please? That's your job.
We've mangled it somewhat. It has the substituted attachment 1A that has the projects that Cindy included. It is a $6.3 million figure, and it has the change in language for council action on improvements.
Should probably say city council, too, is a little.
City council.
I think you said that, didn't you, Teresa? When you read it, you said city council.
I believe I did.
Thank you.
The term council is defined as the city council. It's a defined term in the resolution.
Okay,
You're a
very
good lawyer. I like you.
Thank you.
All right, let's vote on the main motion then.
Raybold?
No.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
No.
Fellers?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
No.
Lamb?
Yes.
Motion carried 4-3.
All right, move on to the next item, please.
Next is item 8, the report of,
Wait. We just voted on her amendment. Did we have to vote?
That was the whole
no,
thing.
that was the main motion.
Oops.
Do we have time?
No.
You can change votes, right?
No, that's okay.
Okay. All right, we'll move on to the next item.
All right, number 8 is the report of claims against the city for February 1st through the 15th, introduced by Lamb.
So moved.
Second.
Seconded by Roy.
And I have an amendment?
We have two amendments.
Motion to amend?
Okay, would somebody like to move?
I have motion to amend number 1, which is to remove the, from the denied claims, Veronic Claudio.
That's introduced by me, because claim is pending receipt of additional information from the claimant or claimant's counsel.
Yes.
Second.
second by Carl.
Do you want to discuss the Hoppy claim now? I've
I'd
got
like
more
to-
information.
I'd like to remove it and just take it at a different time.
Okay.
Just move it down to pending, is
I
that
think
what we
we've
need to
been here
do?
long enough.
Or just remove it?
Just remove it.
Yeah, we can just add it.
Okay.
Would
Can
you-
can I amend that motion number 1 to include removal of the John Hoppy claim for $506.07?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Friendly amendments taken without voting?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Awesome.
We have a motion to amend number 1 on the table. Any discussion on that motion? All right, call the roll, please.
Raybold.
Yes.
Camp.
Yes.
Christensen.
Yes.
Eskridge.
Yes.
Fellers.
Yes.
Gaylor Baird.
Yes.
Lamb.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
On the main motion, please.
Raybold.
Yes.
Camp.
Yes.
Christensen.
Yes.
Eskridge.
Yes.
Fellers. Gaylor Baird.
Yes.
Lamb.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 9 is the resolution requiring the annual publication of total wage and salary information for city employees, introduced by Christensen.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Second by Cindy. Discussion. All right, call the roll, please.
Raybold.
Yes.
Camp.
Yes.
Christensen.
Yes.
Eskridge.
Yes.
Fellers.
Yes.
Gaylor Baird.
Yes.
Lamb.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 10,
I
special.
move, can I move it now, or do I have to wait till you read it?
Special permit 040168. Now you can move
Okay.
it.
I move that be continued with public testimony till March 28th.
28.
That's the 5:30 meeting.
Second by Jane. Discussion on the delay. Okay, call the roll on the delay.
Raybold.
Yes.
Camp.
Yes.
Christensen.
Yes.
Eskridge.
Yes.
Fellers.
Yes.
Gaylor Baird.
Yes.
Lamb.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
And that was with public hearing, I
Yes.
believe.
Yes.
so.
Item 11 is the agreement with the Nebraska Department of Roads for the bike share program, introduced by Lamb.
So moved.
Second.
Second by Jane. Discussion. All right, call the roll, please.
Raybold.
Yes.
Camp.
Yes.
Christensen.
Yes.
Eskridge.
Yes.
Fellers.
Yes.
Gaylor Baird.
Yes.
Lamb.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Public hearing, ordinances second reading are items 12 through 15. Ordinances
Madam-
third,
Madam Clerk, if I may, for the record, I would like on item 14 to have introduced my amendment 2 so that it would be published and that during the next 2 weeks, that we would, in fact, I'd like to do that first.
you have a motion to amend, you want
Uh,
Move.
Motion amend number 2,
motion to amend number 2.
so that'd be appended with the information.
And that we,
Or Patrick has. a
That's
comment.
item 14?
Yep. And do we need to move a delay on that one?
Well, and that was my second motion, yeah, but I wanted to append that first.
Do we
Okay.
have a second on the motion to amend number 2?
Second.
Thank you.
Yeah. Or when we have the,
Just because according to our rules, you can't offer, take action on a bill on second reading.
so you can't
Okay.
amend it. You can offer yours
I
as
just
an
want it to be
additional,
so that it's public, that's my purpose, if there's,
You wanna get it out
so
there
that they can see
people
both.
understand
Yeah.
it,
Yeah.
but since we're delayed until the 28th, I wonder if you couldn't do that.
Not 28.
No, we're on number 11.
I would,
March 14th.
I would-
that's fine, as long as there's, I just want the public to know, so
That
that's
there's
all.
two
So
out
whatever way we can do that.
I would say
that's-
I would say withdraw your motion and move the delay, and then Teresa will just post it on the website.
Okay, then I would move that we delay until, public hearing and vote until March 14th.
Yes. Second.
Second by Jane. Discussion on the delay?
This was to delay,
Item number 14.
and this, do you want more public hearing?
Yes.
please.
Yes.
Delay public hearing and action
Yes.
to March
14th.
14th.
28th was item 10.
to March 14th.
Yes.
Okay, very good. Raybold.
Yes.
Camp.
Yes.
Christensen.
Yes.
Eskridge.
Yes.
Fellers.
Yes.
Gaylor Baird.
Yes.
Lamb.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
Item 16?
Alrighty then. Ordinances third reading.
Ooh, that was special.
Hot mic?
amending chapter 9.44 of the Lincoln Municipal Code relating to fireworks, introduced by Gaylor Baird.
So moved.
Second?
Seconded by Jane. Discussion. All right, call the roll, please.
Raybold?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Fellers?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 16 is adding a new chapter 4.68 relating to boards and commissions to establish the Pinnacle Bank Arena Advisory Board and repealing section 2.10.040 relating to Pershing Manager, introduced by Gaylor Baird.
So moved.
Second.
Seconded by Roy. Discussion. All right, call the roll, please.
Raybold?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Fellers?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 18 is repealing Resolution A-87447, adopted July 22nd, 2013, relating to Pinnacle Bank Arena Advisory Board Committee, introduced by Gaylor Baird.
So moved.
Second.
Seconded by Roy. Discussion. Call the roll, please.
Raybold?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Fellers?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 19 is ordinance amending Chapter 2.76 of the Lincoln Municipal Code relating to the personnel system and Chapter 5.04 relating to alcoholic liquor, introduced by Gaylor Baird.
So moved.
Second.
Seconded by Roy. Discussion.
I think it was just kind of funny. I think someone pointed out to us, is there any other kind of liquor than alcoholic liquor? But
I've never heard of that.
anyway.
I think we established there's gluten-free liquor.
I'm sure it still has alcohol in it, though.
I don't want to drink a gluten-free liquor. Call the roll.
Raybold?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Fellers?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird? Lamb?
Yes.
Carried 7-0.
It's true.
Number 20, ordinance amending section 14.80.080 of the Lincoln Municipal Code relating to Director of Public Works to have general control of sidewalks, introduced by Gaylor Baird.
So moved.
Second.
Seconded by Roy. Discussion. Okay, call the roll, please.
Raybold?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Fellers?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 21 is ordinance amending Chapter 27.06 of the Lincoln Municipal Code relating to use groups, introduced by Gaylor Baird.
So moved.
Second.
Seconded by Roy. Discussion. Call the roll, please.
Raybold?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Fellers?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Minch.
Lamb?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Gotta be on the spot. Item 22 is the Antelope Square redevelopment agreement, introduced by Gaylor Baird.
So moved.
Second.
Seconded by Roy. Discussion. Carl.
Real quickly, just, this is a really important project to Antelope Valley. Great cooperation with NeighborWorks, Lincoln, and Assurity, 24 units with planned here, $5 to $6 million development. Great front door to the Antelope Valley project. Thank those that are participating.
Other discussion. I see somebody sitting out in the audience who this is their brainchild, and I just want to say thank you for taking a look at this and pushing it forward. I know that's not a difficult thing sometimes, but good job. All right, call the roll, please.
Raybold?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Fellers?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 23 is amending fiscal year 15-16 CIP for $825,000 in TIF funds, introduced by Gaylor Baird.
So moved.
Second.
Seconded by Roy. Discussion. All right, call the roll, please.
Raybold?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Fellers?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 24 is authorizing the issuance of tax allocation bonds for the Antelope Square redevelopment project, introduced by Gaylor Baird.
So moved.
Second.
Seconded by Roy. Discussion. All right, call the roll, please.
Raybold?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Fellers?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 25 is the SSH Architecture Redevelopment Agreement, introduced by Gaylor Baird.
So moved.
Second.
Seconded by Roy. Discussion. Okay, call the roll.
Raybold,
Yes.
Camp,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Eskridge,
Yes.
Fellers,
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Lamb.
Yes.
Carried 7-0. Item 26 is amending the fiscal year 15-16 CIP to authorize and appropriate $110,000 in TIF, introduced by Gaylor Baird.
So moved.
Second?
Seconded by Jane. Discussion. All right, call the roll, please.
Raybold,
Yes.
Camp,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Eskridge,
Yes.
Fellers. Fellers,
Yes.
sorry, I don't know what's
Is that
out
me?
there. Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Lamb.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 27, authorizing the issuance of tax allocation bonds for the SSH Architecture Redevelopment Project, introduced by Gaylor Baird.
So moved.
Second?
Seconded by Jane. Discussion. All right, call the roll, please.
Raybold,
Yes.
Camp,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Eskridge,
Yes.
Fellers,
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Lamb.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Resolutions on first reading are items 28 and 29. We have one ordinance on first reading, item 30. On the pending list date certain, we did have a request to delay action for 1 week to March 14th.
Somebody want to make that motion?
So moved.
Okay, second by Jane. Discussion. All right, call the roll on the delay.
Raybold,
Yes.
Camp,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Eskridge,
Yes.
Fellers,
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Lamb.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Anyone wishing to address the council on a matter not on this agenda and not planned to appear on a future agenda may do so at this time.
Mr. Chair, seeing nobody coming forward, I would move for adjournment.
Second?
Seconded by Jane. Call the roll, please.
Raybold,
Yes.
Camp,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Eskridge,
Yes.
Fellers.
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Lamb.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
We are adjourned.